Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Plaistow Board of Selectmen meeting for November 16th, 2020. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. And Beth, may we have a roll call, please?
Select Chair, Ms. Hart.
Here.
Select Vice Chair, Mr. Talion.
Here.
Selectman, Mr. Kishka.
Here.
Selectman, Mr. Blinn.
Here.
Selectman, Mr. DeRoche.
Here.
Joining us remotely, we have several people. We have Mr. Pearson, Town Manager. Mr. Colby, Finance Director. Ms. Voss, Planning Department. From the Planning Board, I believe we have Mr. Alberti.
Okay, good.
We also have a couple of members in the audience, Ms. Millette, Mr. Moore. And from New Hampshire DOT, we have Ms. Burns, Ms. Baldwin, Mr. Reynolds, Mr. Lambert, and from Hoyle and Tanner, we have Mr. Haas and Mr. Spakovich.
All right, pretty full slate. All right. Could I ask everyone to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Okay, our first item agenda tonight is obviously to approve meeting minutes for November 9th of 2020.
Make a motion that we approve the November 9th, 2020 Board of Selectmen minutes.
All right, may I have a second on that, please?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Jay. So if there is no discussion or amendments to this, and I don't see any at this point, could I take a vote? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? All right, that motion carries 5-0-0. Our next agenda item is a decision to join our Clean Energy of New Hampshire. I'm going to turn this over to Julian, so if you could just give us a very brief explanation of why we should join this organization and put a motion on the floor, we can get right to the traffic calming study, okay? So
Well, first of all,
take it away.
Energy Committee did a lot of good things so far, but with all the options on the table, and we kind of informally got help, because in fact, I think you went to some of those as well. We went to other towns, we went to their meetings, and we learned some things from them. The energy market, the technologies involved, the complexities of financing have become so complex that if you just stay within your thing and you just try to read what you can on the internet and, and use your, of course, you have some technical experience if you have that kind of background, it still becomes that there are too many unknowns because you don't have the experience of a group of people that have done a lot of this stuff already. And so you end up, you're working in a vacuum. You might be successful, you might not. But not being successful could also be a big financial impact in a negative way. So instead of flipping a coin and saying, are we going to be lucky this time, it's better to become a member of a group that's their purpose. It's a nonprofit organization. It's New Hampshire, a Clean Energy of New Hampshire. They have basically 130 tech businesses that are members of it now. They have 300 individuals which are members, and 29 local governments already here in New Hampshire.
Okay, so it's a great resource for us.
It's a great resource.
Excellent.
And some of the things that are positives is they get involved in legislative policy. They get involved with technical assistance if you need it. It doesn't mean they're going to do the work for you, but they'll give you the technical assistance and advice. They may attend your energy meetings as well as you get invited to the other members' energy meetings. They provide knowledge, they provide skills, and networking.
All right.
And the networking is a big positive because this is where you get the experience and knowledge from other communities that you don't get when you're working by yourself. And there's a lot of organizations like RPC. We get the benefit of things because it's an organization of a group of communities and people with experience that know what they're doing. Now, again, this is a nonprofit organization. It costs $250 per year as a municipality because it's individual memberships, there's business memberships, and there's municipalities. Municipality membership is $250 per year. And I would the Energy Committee recommended this 2 meetings ago that we join this organization.
All righty.
You've already seen Mr. Henry Herndon. He spoke here a few meetings ago about energy aggregation, which is just one part of energy. And
So can I
I
interrupt you
only
and,
have one question
Okay.
for the finance director,
okay,
because there's one thing that came up in my mind. I know that we have an energy fund, and the way the energy fund works is it's for energy projects. Does membership still fall under that charter? Because this would be a membership joining, not a project it's in itself.
okay. So Greg, did you hear that question?
I did, and I would have to look at the specific language of the capital reserve fund in order to make that determination.
Okay, so if we put a motion on the floor to take this money out of the Energy Commission Capital Reserve Fund, and it turns out that we're not able to do that, we can always motion the language, is that correct?
Sure.
Okay, all
Or
right.
I could put it in the language if I knew what the other option was.
Well, he's not going to know that yet, so I just want to very quickly ask the board if they have any questions for Julian before the motion goes on the floor.
I believe all of you got this when Henry came
Yep,
also
I got it right
explained
here.
as well.
I have it right here. So if I see no questions, could I ask you to put a motion on the floor to
I put a
request that?
motion on the floor for the town, to direct the town manager to apply for membership, the town of Plaistow to apply for membership, to join Clean Energy of New Hampshire, be a member of Clean Energy New Hampshire for the sum of $250 per year to be paid out of the energy fund.
Second the motion.
All right, thank you, thank you. So if there is no further discussion on that, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? All right, that motion carries 500, and we'll take care of the details as to where the funding is going to come from, but I think it's a very worthwhile investment in the towns for a lot, cheap money. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for bringing that to our attention, too. Okay, next item on the agenda is the traffic calming study presentation, and I'm not sure if Ms. Cassandra Burns is going to be presenting this or not, but, hi. So whoever is going to present this traffic calming study, we have a number of people from our planning board as well as people watching on television and our select board. So I turn this over to you, and thank you so much for coming and joining us remotely.
Thank you. Cassie, Maggie, you gonna do an introduction first?
Absolutely.
I can do an intro, yeah. Good evening, everyone. My name is Cassandra Burns, and I'm a senior design engineer with the Department of Transportation. I'm here with my colleagues to present a traffic calming and safety improvement project along New Hampshire 121A. So I have today with me Maggie Baldwin from the DOT, Toby Reynolds from the DOT, and Bill Lambert from the DOT. And then from Hoyle Tanner, I have Stephen Haas and Jacob Sparkovich. So we're in the very early preliminary design phase of this project, where we're looking at conceptual alternatives, and Stephen is going to do the bulk of the presentation. So.
Oh, all right, great. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, Cassie. Thank you to the Board of Selectmen for having us here. I'm just gonna try sharing my screen and let me know when and if you see.
Here you go. All right, perfect.
You guys see it?
Yep, we can, thank you.
Awesome. Well, if there's any issues as I go through it, let me know and I'll slow down and get back on track. But as we all know, this is the Main Street traffic calming and safety improvements. That's a state number up there, 40641, but just going to run through it for you real quick. There we go. All right. So Cassie did most of the introductions. I just wanted to point out, I'm Stephen Haas. I'm the consultant project manager. We're the design consultants for the New Hampshire Department of Transportation who will be designing the project with them. The other important thing to point out here is there is a project website for this project hosted on the NHDOT's website, and I can provide this link for those of you that probably having a hard time seeing it or copying it down. But basically this link, as the project gets rolling, will be a place for the department to post conceptual plans, meeting minutes, such as this meeting here tonight, and other relevant project information that the town or its citizens may want to see. So the purpose of our meeting, we've had a few preliminary interactions with the town so far on the project, and what became quite evident right away was that in the past decade, since this the planning for this project has kind of gotten underway. There's been a lot of turnover at the select board, at the town positions. So a lot of folks may not be familiar with the whole process. So we figured it was best before we tried to develop alternatives to give a brief overview of the history of the project as we understand it, and then give the town an understanding of some of the options that may be out there for traffic calming and safety improvements, and then work with the town to select the improvements that best fit the corridor. So tonight we'll introduce the project, as I said. We'll review some of the deficiencies along the corridor as well as the potential improvement options. We'll look to solicit feedback from the select board on some of your concerns and some of the improvements you might like to see. One of the most important steps that we feel is we'd like to set up a working group with a few representatives from the town to actually meet with my team, with the DOT, and with the Regional Planning Commission to kind of refine some of the desired improvement alternatives and work through the process. And lastly on here, if the select board feels it would be beneficial, we would like to work with the RPC to put out a survey to the community to get the similar feedback that we'll be getting from you folks tonight. So the project area, I'll jump into this a little bit closer, but you can see on the right, this is an aerial view of Plaistow showing New Hampshire 125 running up the middle and New Hampshire 121A off to the right. What you see here in red is the currently defined project limits of the traffic calming safety project in the NHDOT's 10-year plan. That runs from the railroad tracks north of downtown to the public library on the south end, about 3/4 of a mile. As I mentioned, parallels Route 125 and passes through the village center. Before I jump into the details, I did want to highlight here at the bottom the maintenance responsibilities along the corridor. So from the southern 125 intersection up to the Elm Street intersection at the town hall, that is NHDOT summer maintenance and town winter maintenance or plowing. Once you get north of Elm Street up to the northern 125 intersection, it is all state summer and winter maintenance. Everyone still seeing my screen? Okay. So jumping in a little closer here, again, the red is the limits of the current 10-year plan project. From the railroad tracks or Dustin Ave in the north, proceeds south past the town hall, through the Elm Street intersection where the recent Safe Routes to School projects improvements were made, down to the Pollard School here, across the Seaverbrook culvert at the Historical Society, through the Westville Road and the Mayray Ave intersection, and then ultimately down to the Bittersweet Drive and the public library. Again, about 3/4 of a mile. Just wanted to point out the existing conditions along the stretch of the corridor, as well as the deficiencies that we see. And I'll use Google Earth to jump back into some of the specifics as I need to. So there's 11-foot travel lanes, or the space dedicated to the cars throughout the corridor. That's pretty typical for a roadway like this. Travel lanes typically vary from 12 feet or 10 to 12 feet, depending on the type of roadway you're looking at. What's not typical in some cases is the shoulder widths. It varies quite considerably out here from as little as 4 feet up to about 14 feet. And I can show you a pretty representative example of that, but I'm sure you're all pretty familiar. This would be just north of the town hall here. You can see this very wide shoulder kind of on both sides. It's informally used for parking and other things, but really makes it feel like a highway out there. It doesn't make it feel like a village center. Again, as you head to the south, down towards Westville Road, in that area, it does narrow down to the 4 to 5 foot shoulders in that area. Traffic volumes, just under 10,000 cars per day south of Elm Street. Once you get north of Elm Street, this does drop off to just over 6,000 cars per day as some of those cars bypass and head up or down Elm Street and continue on their kind of cut through around 125, excuse me. Significant amount of heavy vehicles along the corridor, 8%, which is a bit higher than typical. Some of that being traffic that's bypassing 125. Some of it, I believe, is destined for construction companies and other businesses along Elm Street to the north. Posted speed along the corridor is 30 miles per hour from end to end. NHDOT did collect some speed data back in May of this past year, I believe, and that showed a 41 mile per hour 85th percentile speed. The 85th percentile speed is the speed at which 85% of cars are going that speed or slower, and it generally indicates the speed which most motorists feel is a safe traveling speed for the conditions along the roadway, and is often used to help guide speed limit decisions. So again, it's about 10 to 11 miles per hour faster than the posted speed limit out there. There are limited pedestrian facilities throughout the corridor. Just reorientate myself here. So there's existing sidewalk along the west side throughout the entire corridor from the railroad tracks down to the library. However, on the east side, the sidewalk only runs down to the Historical Society or the Brook Crossing, and there is no sidewalk along the east side of the road. And as I understand it, I don't believe there's sidewalk on either side of the road from the railroad tracks to the north on 125 or from the southern limits down to the southern intersection of 125. There are no marked bicycle facilities throughout the corridor. However, there are those shoulders and over wide shoulders along the entire corridor. I'm guessing there is some bicycle usage throughout there, and I believe it is a designated bike route throughout here. There is undefined on-street parking. As I mentioned, that wide shoulder does serve to allow cars to park in it in many cases, but there isn't, with the exception, I believe, in front of the town hall, there are very few places where it's actually striped to show cars where they can park. Excessive roadway cross slope we know is a concern in the town, especially down in front of the Pollard School. So that's the crown on the roadway. And that location, I know it's pretty steep and it's difficult for someone in a wheelchair to cross over that hump in the road. And also kind of when you're standing on that curb, you feel like you're a couple feet below the center of the roadway. So you feel like it's hard for cars to see you. And lastly, intersection geometry. The Elm Street intersection used to have some poor geometry there with the right turn slip lane, which has been removed. But the Elm Street intersection still has, the Westville Road intersection still has some large radius and some concerns there. And I know there are some concerns with the Forest Ave intersection just to the south of the currently defined project limits, and even further south on North Ave. To take a step back and just go through some of the history on the project. Recent history starting back in 2011 was when the Rockingham Planning Commission did their Main Street traffic calming plan, kind of the genesis for a lot of the stuff that we're looking at here today. I'll jump into this one in a little more detail later, but basically it was a broader focus along the entire corridor from each 125 intersection and looking at recommendations for how to calm traffic throughout the corridor. Following this was the 2011 Village District Charette. This had a similar study limits to what I showed in red on our map, kind of the village center. Not only did it focus on traffic calming and safety improvements, but also some of the streetscaping, the economic development aspects of bringing people to downtown Plaistow. There was also a Safe Routes to School project. This was initiated by a Safe Routes to School travel plan, which identified pedestrian school children walking routes throughout the town and identified potential improvements. This ended up focusing on the Elm Street intersection, and we constructed, Hoyle Tanner was actually involved in this project and constructed the sidewalks reconstructed sidewalks from the town hall down to the Pollard School, removed the right turn slip lane at Elm Street, added the landscaping and installed the flashing beacon and curb neck downs at the crossing at the Pollard School. And I'll get into some of these types of features in a moment. And lastly, the 2020 Plaistow Master Plan, which kind of carries forward some of these traffic calming and safety improvements that have been carried in the other documents and looks to kind of implement some of them on a broader scale across Plaistow, as I understand it. So all these documents have helped us to synthesize what we call the purpose and need for the project. And I won't really read this word for word, but basically to reduce speeds and eliminate cut-through traffic and improve operations for pedestrians and motor vehicles and other users throughout the corridor. As I mentioned, Rockingham Planning Commission traffic calming plan that was created, similar goals to what we've talked about. And again, this was a 3-mile corridor from 120, each end of 125, where 121A hits it rather. Identified similar issues that we've talked about already, the truck traffic throughout the corridor, the cut through nature of cars trying to avoid 125, some of that due to the construction of 125 that's been ongoing over the past decade, but also just the congestion with the lights and the commercial district out there. And then travel speeds is identified. I think they had similar data shown in this planning commission study that the DOT found in back in the spring of this year, where travel speeds were in excess of what the posted speed was. So this study made several recommendations on the regulatory side, public policy, as well as physical improvements. Some of these included the town taking ownership of the roadway. And what that would mean is if the town were taking ownership or maintaining the road, there would be certain things that they would be able to do, certain types of features they can install that DOT may not be prefer on their roadway. This study looked at reducing the speed limit from 30 miles per hour down to 25, and also implementing a complete streets philosophy or redefining the roadway to provide amenities for pedestrians, bicyclists, motorists, public utilities, landscaping, etc. Some of the specifics, they did look at location-specific improvements from New Hampshire 125 down to the railroad crossing. The study recommended sidewalks and shoulders along both sides of the roadway there. At the town hall, implementing a mid-block crossing as well as curb extensions. And again, I'll get into some of the specifics of these types of treatments in a moment. At Elm Street, I recommended a roundabout or removal of the slip lane, which was done as part of the Safe Routes to School project. At Pollard School, a mid-block crossing, which was also done as part of the Safe Routes to School project, and a lateral shift, which I'll get into in a minute. At the library and Bittersweet Drive intersection, they suggested a roundabout or curb extensions. And then at East and West Pine and North Ave, we're looking at roundabouts as well. All right, so now let's take the time to kind of walk through some of the specific types of traffic calming and safety features that we think could be implemented along the corridor, kind of give you a description of what those are, what the benefits are, what the potential concerns or limitations of each of these features may be, and then just give you a high, low, medium kind of overall thought on cost and how they compare to each other. One thing I would like to point out before we get started, though, is depending on the maintenance responsibilities, I pointed out in the beginning, DOT and the town have differing maintenance responsibilities along the corridor. There will need to be a discussion about what features can be implemented and what can't, depending on who is responsible for maintaining that section of roadway. So as I think you're all familiar, this first feature we're looking at here is a roundabout. I don't believe there are any currently in the town of Plaistow, but they are starting to become pretty prolific throughout the state of New Hampshire. So just a circular intersection that has traffic move in a counterclockwise direction, all in the same direction. These can be varying sizes from a standard roundabout that's shown here. This is actually in Rye, I believe, down to a compact or a mini intersection that can be designed kind of to fit within a much smaller footprint, sometimes within an existing intersection. Benefits of this, they do have increased capacity over a stop control type intersection. But that wouldn't be the reason for implementing them here necessarily. The goal here would be to help reduce speeds by, asking cars to slow down as they come through the intersection where they wouldn't otherwise have to with a stop controlled, and also to reduce accident severity. With a roundabout, the angle of the collisions is reduced, so that the severity is reduced. Another benefit with a roundabout is, unlike a traffic signal or even a stop controlled intersection, there's no warrant required. You don't have to meet a certain vehicle demand to install one of these. Concerns for speeds and safety is enough. Potential concerns or limitations, they can have property impacts depending on the size of roundabout you look to build. Obviously, the larger the footprint that is, the more it has a chance to impact the properties on the adjacent to it. But again, looking at potentially a compact or a mini roundabout that has a smaller footprint, that may be able to lessen those impacts. As far as costs, these are on the higher end of the scale. It is a full intersection reconstruction generally with drainage and curbing and all the things that go along with that. So this is a higher cost piece of infrastructure. So corner extensions and bulb outs. So this would be what you're familiar with at the recently constructed Safe Routes to School mid-block crossing at the Pollard School. So basically, they're an extension of the curb and the sidewalk out into the roadway to reduce that crossing width and make it easier for pedestrians to get across by limiting their exposure time on the pavement, and also to increase pedestrian visibility as they're bumped out into the pavement. You know, it kind of gets them out in front of those parked cars or any other obstructions that may be on the sidewalk, lampposts, et cetera. So they're more visible to traffic and they're more likely to yield to them. Limitations, these do have a limited speed reduction capability. As some of you may know, the bump out at the Pollard School didn't necessarily slow cars down driving through there. It's really more intended to be a pedestrian safety measure. They do have a lower cost, however, depending on how they're used. They're really just a piece of curb and sidewalk put out on the road. And depending on drainage needs, the cost may go a bit higher. A raised intersection. So basically, this is an intersection that's raised up to the level of the surrounding sidewalk around it, so that instead of having ramps at the crosswalks, everything is flush. The goal of this is speed reduction. Now having that vertical shift as you go through the intersection reminds cars that they need to slow down. Also, some of the visual texturing that can be done with this also give them those clues that they're in a congested or a pedestrian friendly area. They should be slowing down. And to that point, it makes the entire intersection pedestrian friendly, raising that intersection up to the level of the curb and potentially texturing it or painting it makes it appear a pedestrian friendly zone and allows pedestrians to use the entire intersection. Some of the concerns and limitations, maintenance, again, depending on what materials are used on it and who's maintaining it, can get costly. Also drainage, as the intersection is raised up, one or more of these approaches may be blocked from water running down the curb line, so you may need to install drainage structures to make sure it's picked up adequately. All those things leading to this being one of the higher cost measures to install. So the lateral shifts, this is what the RPC was recommending in front of the Pollard School, I believe. So basically what it is to get a straightaway on a road, taking away that straight element to it and introducing some horizontal shift to the roadway where you otherwise wouldn't have a curve, with the goal of reducing speeds, obviously depending on what the geometry of that is and how far it pushes cars out of their straight travel path and how flat the radiuses are. Depends on how much speed reduction you actually get out of it. It's also a location that could be used for crosswalks as desired. Again, the RPC was proposing that for the Pollard School. That lateral shift and potential speed reduction would be a good spot to cross pedestrians due to the reduction in speed. Potential concerns with this, property impacts, depending on how far this is pumped out. Obviously, you're pushing the footprint of the roadway beyond its existing edge. So depending on where you did that would have potential to impact homes or businesses should they be close to the road. Also, truck accommodation. As we know, there are a decent amount of trucks using the corridor, so that this would need to be designed to allow them to safely access through this feature. Depending on the level of the shift that's done, the cost would be somewhere between medium to high, as drainage improvements and similar type construction will be required.
Stephen, could I just interrupt your presentation just to ask you a quick question?
Yes, please.
Those lateral shifts, are those going to impact the new sidewalks that we just put down in front of Pollard?
If it were implemented there, probably. Yeah. If it were implemented other places, not necessarily.
Okay.
So, again, the goal out of this meeting is going to be to kind of determine what improvements the town would like to see and where to focus those improvements, which we'll get into a little bit later.
Okay.
But so, yeah, that's the trade-off. If you already have infrastructure in place that you don't want to disturb, something like this probably wouldn't be the right treatment.
Okay.
So a raised crosswalk or a speed table, these can be combined or separate elements. Basically, similar to the raised intersection that picked up the profile of the roadway and brought it level with or flush with the adjacent curb. This is a smaller version of that basically is just a ramp up, a flat top that's 10 to 12 feet across, and then a ramp back down. That can be used just as a speed table, and I want to be clear, not a speed bump, but a speed table. It's much gentler, but still does let cars know they need to slow down through that vertical measure. So it could be the speed table on its own, or it could be combined with a raised crosswalk, which is what you see in this picture here, where the crosswalk is actually right at the top of it, which is good, again, because it's flush with the adjacent curb and there's no ramp required. These have the potential for speed reduction due to the vertical element, and can be good for encouraging diversion, pushing cars back up to 125 if you so choose, when used in series, if there's a number of these along the roadway. Generally, just putting in one probably doesn't do enough, but again, all these elements are designed to work kind of in concert with each other to help reinforce that it's a slower area, pedestrian-friendly area. They'll also help with pedestrian visibility by elevating the pedestrian kind of above the level of the, the general roadway and increase the likelihood cars will see them. Similar to the raised intersection, the maintenance and the drainage are a concern for this, but the cost is generally lower because they're a much smaller treatment than the raised intersection. On-street parking, we think, is something that could be pretty beneficial throughout this corridor. That, again, that's just allocating the paved space to parking, so taking that wide shoulder and formalizing it for use as parking. It does have the potential for speed reduction when those spaces are occupied. Occupying those spaces kind of brings the edge of the road in, serves to congest the road a little bit and to help naturally slow vehicles down as they go throughout that corridor, because they don't have that wide buffer on the side to allow them to feel safe driving at fast speeds. Especially when used with curb extensions, which again are those bump outs at the crosswalks or even just at intersections where there aren't crosswalks, to help bring in the pavement and formalize those spaces. The on-street parking could be a number of types of parking. Could be parallel, could be angled, both head in or back in, depending on what the town would be interested in. Some concerns and limitations: sight distance. Having those cars on the street does potentially serve as a sight distance obstruction for pedestrians looking across the road. However, if designed properly with setbacks from the crosswalks to where the cars are allowed to park, some of those things can be mitigated. There's also the friction with bicyclists that's a concern. A bicyclist riding adjacent to a parked car can be a hazard if that person in the car doesn't see them and opens the door into them. So if possible, it's good to put in what's known as a door buffer to separate a bicyclist from those vehicles. Cost on this is low to medium. Again, just throwing down some striping to formalize the parking is relatively low cost. However, you get into medium territory when you start introducing the curb extensions and such to help more formalize those spots. Rectangular rapid flashing beacon. This is actually the crossing at Pollard that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. So basically that's just a amber beacon that flashes whenever a pedestrian is waiting to cross the street. Those can be both a passive system where the pedestrian just walks up and it detects them and it starts flashing, or they're actually, in the case of Pollard School, it's a push button that it's activated. So the goal of this is to increase driver yielding behavior. They have been shown to significantly increase drivers stopping to let pedestrians cross the road. And doing that obviously reduces the crashes with those pedestrians. Some concerns: placement consistency. When these are used, they like them to be used along a corridor, not just one isolated one. If you have multiple crossings along a corridor, they like to see them used at each of the crossings, so drivers know to expect, hey, if there's a crossing, I'm going to see one of these flashing beacons. The DOT has indicated that the crossings south, the mid-block crossings south of Elm Street along this corridor should have flashing beacons, whereas due to the volumes and speeds, whereas north of Elm, it's not as big of a concern. Cost on these can be low if you're just putting in the flashing beacon and some lighting. But if you're putting in the bump outs and other amenities, that would drive the cost up a bit higher.
Steve, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Is there any types of automated speeding ticket systems that have been implemented within New Hampshire?
Anyone from the DOT want to handle that one?
I can do that. I'm Bill Lambert, State Traffic Engineer. I know that Chiefs of Police Association has gone to the legislature on a couple of occasions to try to get automated enforcement for certain things, and it doesn't get very far. So the only automated enforcement that I'm aware of is for toll evasion in the turnpike plazas, but there isn't anything for speed or red light running or anything like that.
Thank you. One other question, Steve. The parking on the side of the road, does that also add to the complexity of plowing the road during the winter months?
Having the cars in those locations?
Yeah,
Certainly it would. I mean, is there any type of ban in Plaistow currently during snow events?
Yeah.
Not in front of the town hall where we have parking right now, and we don't have any other parking along this corridor. So they're basically the curbs are there, but there's no parking in a normal sense.
Yep.
So
Yeah, certainly it would. I mean,
I'm just saying
if you're encouraging parking out there and they're heavily utilized, that obviously would increase the challenges with maintenance, and it may need you to go to some sort of winter parking ban during events.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I have a question.
All right, just a couple of more, actually, I think just one more feature I wanted to go over with. This is what is known as.
Steve, hold on. We have one more question.
Going back to the raised speed tables, what type of maintenance do you incur with those? Is it plows digging them up? Is there a lot of maintenance that goes with those types of features?
Yeah, I would say obviously plows have a tendency to damage them, so they would, more so than just the regular pavement. Also, depending on what you do, you can see in this case there's a textured surface across the top. I think in this case it was a resin, as they call it, that went across the top to kind of give it a brick look and feel to it. So as you start to implement some of those more kind of streetscape elements to it, the life of those and the cost to replace them drives the cost up. But they can be less. They can just be pavement, but then it would really just be the plowing. So it just depends on how intricate the design is. Anything else before I move on?
Nope. Go ahead.
Okay. So this is what is known as the road diet. Basically, the road diet is reclaiming the existing surface out there and redistributing it amongst other types of usages. Typically, you have a lot of space dedicated to vehicles, whether it's extra lanes, wide shoulders, etc., and redistributing that to pedestrian and bicyclist infrastructure or streetscaping, landscape buffers, that type of thing. So the goal here is a potential speed reduction. Again, if you take what was a wide road or a wide shoulder and make it feel a bit more congested, it has the potential to reduce speeds. As I mentioned, add places for pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure that may not have existed before, and also some of that separation through the grass buffer, as I have shown here. It also reduces the crossing width. If you're able to take, 10 feet of pavement out of the width of the roadway, that's 10 less feet that a pedestrian has to cross the roadway and risk getting hit by a vehicle. So significant benefit there as well. The cost on this varies, I would say, from medium to high. If you're looking to do an entire corridor and reduce the pavement width down, that may mean shifting curb lines, shifting drainage, building, bigger sidewalks, et cetera. So the cost is high. But if you do it on a smaller scale, obviously the cost comes back down. So those are the traffic calming safety features we wanted to present to you tonight. And as I mentioned, I'm sure we'll have more questions when I get to the end. And our goal ultimately will be to try and narrow some of these down and see what the community would like to see implemented. But before we get there, I just wanted to highlight some of the resources and potential impacts throughout the corridor. On the natural resources side of things, there's not a lot, seeing how the roadway is fairly built up throughout the corridor. Excuse me. There is the Seaver Brook crossing down by the Historical Society. This is a small box culvert. Not sure if this will be touched as part of the project. We are going to evaluate the condition of it, but not sure if it's going to need to be replaced or be impacted as part of the project for some other reason. There are state and federally listed wildlife species, in some places throughout the corridor. We're not sure exactly where those are at the moment or if they'd be impacted, but depending on what alternatives are selected and what the impacts of those are, we'll nail those down, figure out what they are and exactly if they will be impacted. And also Plaistow is a MS4 community. So that's the municipal stormwater permitting program. So we'll need to make sure that the improvements that are made out here are done so that they match the MS4 permitting, and the stormwater uses best management practices for treatment. On the cultural resources side of things, the Plaistow Town Hall is a National Register eligible property. However, the Village District is not a historic district. It does, however, have features and characteristics that are significant, so we want to make sure we're not impacting those. Right away out here does vary significantly. As you can see here, I noted 45 up to over 110 feet. And as we understand, we don't yet have survey, but we understand that the roadway is not necessarily centered within that right of way. So there may be spots where there's plenty of right of way on one side of the road to do stuff and not very much at all on the other side. So in some spots, if we're looking to squeeze in a sidewalk, we anticipate there could be some impacts. But again, at this point, that's just not known. So budget and schedule. This is a 80% Fed, 20% state funded project. There's no local match that I'm aware of. It does have a current construction budget of just over $800,000. To put that in perspective, the Safe Routes to School project constructed about 1,700 linear feet of improvements. That's either both sides of the roads combined. And that was constructed for just under $300,000, I believe. So if a similar level of improvements to that was made throughout this entire 3/4 mile project, it would be about $1.4 million or more, which again, as you can see, doesn't match the current budget. So the goal of what we're looking at here is to work with the town to determine the priority locations and the preferred improvements that can be made to match to this budget. We do also encourage the town to seek additional funding if there are other elements that they would like to have constructed. Otherwise, we're going to look to try and meet the budget the department has. On the schedule side of things, we're originally looking to have our first public meeting somewhere around this month or next month of this year. However, as I mentioned, we took a step back to kind of give this more high-level presentation to the select board. So we anticipate that will slide out a bit, and we'll work to set that up at some point after this meeting. And that would just be kind of more of a blank slate meeting to discuss with the town, similar things to what we're discussing here, to get their impression of the concerns and issues on the corridor, give them some potential types of improvements, but not necessarily have a concept to present to them at that time. The second public meeting, however, would be when we would come back and we'd have all of the concerns and potential improvements kind of synthesized and be looking to present a preferred alternative to them. And we anticipate that would happen somewhere in spring of next year. After that point, we look to develop our preliminary plans and our environmental documentation in the summer of next year, followed by a public hearing should it be required in the fall of 2021. This would lead to the final design of the project in 2022 and 2024, and we'd be pushing for an advertising date of late fall of 2024. So circling back to the purpose of the meeting, again, we've kind of walked through introducing the project and the deficiencies. Once we break up here, we'll get your feedback through questions. And I want to just remind everyone that we're looking to set up a working group. So get some folks from the town, maybe someone from the select board, maybe Dee from planning, to put her on the spot to kind of work with the DOT and myself and RPC to kind of hone in on some of these improvements that we're looking to be made out here. So with that, I think I'll open it up for questions.
So, all right, Stephen, I guess I have a question for you. Could you be a little bit more specific and flesh out what you mean by, quote, the town taking ownership? I think we really need to have some very specific information on what the DOT expects the town to repair and maintain, because obviously this is a budgetary issue, and in the past, we have not been aware of some of our responsibilities, and it's kind of snuck up on us, and I want to make sure that everybody understands what our responsibilities are.
Okay, I think I might turn that over to the DOT if they'd be willing to answer that.
Hi, this is Maggie Baldwin. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, thank you, Maggie.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. So I think as we talk about this project, we're not anticipating that there would be any change in the obligations for maintenance. I think the conversation with options for town maintenance only comes up with, if the town is interested, and that would open up some of the alternatives, that we typically wouldn't be able to get our maintenance folks to buy off on. So we're not saying that you guys would be obligated at all to take on any different maintenance expectations than you have currently. We're just saying that if you wanted to pursue some of those alternatives that maybe we can't get our maintenance folks to buy into, that might be a conversation that you guys want to have internally.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Steve, can I ask you a question? Have you looked at anything that would address either the volume of traffic going through this corridor or the type of vehicle that drives through this, such as a construction vehicle versus a normal passenger car?
So I think not specifically, but the goal of the project will be to try and implement some of these measures that increase the travel time throughout the corridor and thus encourage diversion back to NH 125, which is the preferred corridor through Plaistow. So not specifically restricting any types of vehicles, but just increasing the travel time and kind of the congested feel coming through the corridor so the cars move back to 125. And one thing we didn't mention, the state does have a project out on 125 sometime in the near future to coordinate traffic signals. And we were kind of hoping that if that's constructed, when this project went to construction, that maybe the construction on this project would push folks back out to 125 and they would realize it actually is faster to stay on 125 and bypass the town. And that'd be a good coordination and timing benefit to have those two work out like that.
Thank you, Steve. That was a good answer. Thank you.
Okay, and we have another question from our Selectman DeRoche.
This is for Maggie. You had mentioned some features that your maintenance group may not maintain. Are there specific ones that you guys presented tonight that would fall into that category?
Well, I can talk about one thing specifically to give you kind of a feel. We've had a lot of internal discussions about what the typical section of this roadway should look like. From our understanding, in coordination with our planning bureau, there has been some expectations on what that width of the pavement is for the section south of Elm and north of Elm. So from what we understand, the state maintaining, doing winter maintenance for north of Elm, that we would want to see a 32-foot paved width. And south of Elm, it could be as low as 28 feet, I believe. So that would be something that if we wanted to pursue an even smaller typical than what those dimensions would allow us, that would be something that might push you into considering whether you wanted to take over ownership. Because obviously it's an equipment issue with us being able to plow a smaller road. So like that's just one example of where, if we considered a tighter typical to really be one of those elements you wanted to pursue, that would be a conversation that we'd need to have.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'll take a comment. I've seen these raised crosswalks in other places, and at first they could have initiated some four-letter words, but I did find that they were much better than speed bumps, and they were very effective, and they still looked nice. I've seen them in other places. Mm-hmm. They didn't seem very destructive, considering they're out in the same weather conditions we have in the wintertime. Mm-hmm. So I think in a combination of those and the jut outs seem to work very well. The roundabouts, I looked at some of the places, we've talked about them before, and some of these places, they just don't have the real estate to do a roundabout unless you're taking away people's yards. Mm-hmm. And all these homes are pretty close to the road, so you're basically up their sidewalk. So, but I have seen these raised sidewalks, mm-hmm. and I was recently, I've seen a lot of them in Massachusetts and some other New Hampshire towns, and they've been very effective, and they don't really jolt your vehicle like the speed bumps do. So,
So.
I will say, oh,
No,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead,
can I
Maggie.
just-
Go ahead, Maggie.
Okay. There is one over by Southern New Hampshire University that I travel across on a fairly regular basis. And I agree that it's a pretty nice way to get people to slow their speeds down. I think the benefit of the roundabout in one of these locations, we've had a lot of coordination with our safety section. And they think that this corridor would be an appropriate location for a compact roundabout, which really is a limited footprint. And there are a couple intersections where we could potentially fit something like that if we wanted to pursue that. So I wouldn't say don't discount the roundabout just because of the real estate, because there could be potential for us to implement a tighter type of roundabout in this corridor.
Okay. One more question.
I see how effective they are when you have 4 roads coming together, but how do you do it when there's only 3 roads? Like on our Elm Street, it's really on a 3-way intersection, and it almost looks like if you don't make that curve to the right, the ones going past the straight through are still going to speed through, and then it might even be more of a hazard, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, so the goal is definitely, having a balance of traffic definitely helps. If you have one roadway that has a lot more traffic than the other one, the low volume leg may never get a chance to get out. And like you said, balancing the geometry as they come into the roundabout, you have to make sure that you provide some level of deflection so that people aren't able to just shoot through on a straightaway and barely have to turn. So it definitely is something that has to be closely evaluated to make sure it'll function properly.
So can you tell us the size and scope of the group of people that you would like to get on board to discuss this before we start finalizing public hearings and that type of thing?
Sure. I guess I'll state my thoughts, and then Maggie, Cassie, let me know if you agree. I guess I was thinking, obviously us from the DOT and Hoyle Tanner, I think we'd have a representative from the Rockingham Planning Commission involved. And then I was thinking maybe, if possible, somebody from the select board and someone from planning
Okay.
at the town.
Okay. Any citizens at this point? To be determined.
I
okay.
would
To be determined. All right. Okay. No, that's fine. And I believe Selectman DeRoche has a question for you as well. Thank you.
It's more along the lines of sidewalks. Would this project include sidewalks at least up one side of that whole stretch, or maybe even both sides?
Mm-hmm.
So certainly everything is on the table. I would point back to the budget and say we need to tailor it to that. I think, in places where you have sidewalk, maybe you look to leave that alone and construct it where you don't have it. But yeah, certainly anything's on the table at this point.
Do any of the members of the planning board who are present here or remoting in have any questions for the DOT at this point? Go ahead, Tim.
So I guess I have a question on the budget. You mentioned this project had an $800,000 budget, and then I think then you mentioned sort of to do the full, do the traffic calming along the full length was going to require maybe closer to 1 or 1.2 million. Did I understand that?
Yeah, 1.4, I think is what I said.
1.4, yeah. So I guess my choice would be, maybe try to do it in phases. If construction isn't going to occur until 2024, that gives us a couple of years to put money in our capital reserve fund. I'm not sure we can come up with $600,000 in 3 or 4 years, but if the thing was phased out, at least we could follow up in subsequent years to finish out. Maybe we have the right of way to do the sidewalk, but we don't actually do the sidewalk until a later phase, or something along those lines.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's why we want to get together and just see what the town's priorities are, rather, and try to focus on those, and then look to phase anything else that makes sense that the town would like to do in the future above and beyond.
So what are our next steps? When do we need to have a public hearing, and can you describe what our next steps would be?
I guess I would say if the town could think about maybe 2 people to meet with us in the DOT and provide us with those names, I think then we'll look to set up some meetings with those folks and start having some conversations. I think ultimately, and correct me if I'm wrong, Maggie or Cassie, you know, we want to meet with the public sometime in the near future, and I know we have to give some sort of notice for that. So that would be one of our next steps. I don't know if we have to have have meetings with this working group before we go to the public. If we want to have some preliminary feedback from them from how that group is working. But I guess I would say first step would be just to kind of get us your thoughts on who could participate, and then we'll get back to you with the next steps.
All right, so if possible, I'd like to be able to provide you with those people's names before the end of the year. Is that going to be enough time for you to get your project started?
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
Or would
sooner
you
would
like
be
it
better.
sooner? Would you like it sooner, by December 1st?
That would be fantastic if you could do
Okay.
that.
All right, we can definitely put our heads together and get someone from our select board and someone from our planning board to work with you guys. Just give us a couple of weeks to get those names and volunteers, and we will definitely get back to you. So if the board has no more questions or none from the audience, one more question, Julian.
I
Go
just
ahead.
have one question. In the case of a rotary, and there happen to be crosswalks at these rotary sections, how do you implement the crosswalk when cars are going around a rotary?
It's more challenging, certainly. Some people don't like roundabouts for that reason, because the cars don't have to stop necessarily. Generally, the way it's done is the crosswalk is set back a car's length in front of the roundabout, so that one car can sit beyond the crosswalk and wait for their position, their turn to move into the roundabout, so they're not having to focus on the pedestrian while the pedestrian's looking to cross. That pedestrian can be crossing behind that car and the next car that's waiting. It generally pretty manageable though at a single lane roundabout. When you start talking about multi-lane roundabouts, it becomes much more complicated, but we're certainly not talking about that. So,
And I think at this point in time, this is a detailed discussion for once the committee gets formed. So if I don't have any other questions from any people who are remoting in or any board members, I'm going to end this discussion. And thank you so much for remoting in. You've given us a whole bunch of information for us to digest and to look at. And we're really kind of excited to see what's going to happen in the next couple of years. So thank you all for coming, and I wish you all a good night.
great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night. Good
I'd
night.
like to thank you also for coming down. I've seen some of your people on the road doing the surveying, and we were
Yeah.
walking, and we started to talk to them. They were extremely courteous. And I really liked the fact that they had a little handout to give you discussing what the project is for public dissemination. So that I was really impressed with the courtesy offered by the people going around doing the surveying.
Great.
All righty.
Thank you.
All right. Good night, ladies and gentlemen.
Good night.
Okay. Good night. So our next agenda item is warrant article discussion. And before we jump into that, I just wanted to talk a little bit to the people who are watching tonight. I wanted to let you all know that Greg Talon and I just finished completing a meeting of the CIP committee. That's our capital improvement committee for the town. And for those of you who don't know what that is, it's comprised of budget committee members, select board members, and planning board members. And what we do is we get together every year and we try to lay out our capital expenditures for the town. And it can be from anywhere from 5 years to 25 years. But it's a great tool for us to use to plan for the future. And it helps us so that we don't have major spikes in our requests for our taxpayers. And it's kind of like what we would do to put aside money to buy a car or to plan on a vacation. Now, I know a lot of department heads and boards have their little pet projects, and they all want to see their reserve funds funded. However, COVID is not going away anytime soon, and in fact, it looks as if rumors have it that this winter is perhaps going to be worse than last winter, if that's at all possible. So with that in mind, our board wants to make sure that our taxpayers understand that we are being very prudent and very fiscally conservative. And so when we present our warrant articles to you guys in March, we are going to prioritize the warrant articles to make sure that we have our town infrastructure taken care of and our safety and security taken care of first and foremost. A lot of the reserve funds are really wonderful and nice, but I think if COVID is going to decimate us again, it's going to cause some economic hardships to our citizens. And so we want to just, put our finger on the pause button for next year and try to minimize the taxable amounts of warrant articles as well as the number of them, just to give us a break for 1 year. So I guess that's where we're going with this, and we're going to be discussing all of this kind of right now. And Mr. Colby, I know you're up here, and if you have anything to say at this point with regards to anything that we're going to be talking about, just jump in and interrupt me, okay? All right. Okay. So we discussed a few of the warrants in a preliminary fashion at our last meeting, and we're going to fine tune this right now, and obviously we'll kind of distill it and fine tune it over the next couple of meetings to make sure we have a really good product for you. Greg Talon has been working really hard on putting this together for us, and I really appreciate all of his expertise on this. So Greg, you want to start out with us and just kind of go over some of these warrant articles and have people talk about them and discuss them if you have questions on them.
So starting on page 3, we have the two major budgets, the operating budget, general fund. We are working on coming up with a total for that. We're not ready yet to come up with a final value or final numeric value for that. The water budget, we just received revised the water budget, so we now can plug that in to be $431,300. So that would be going into those red spots where you see all the zeros. And this would be totally withdrawn from the Water Enterprise Fund, so there's no taxation associated with this. Basically, it is the users of the water fund the potable water that will actually be paying for this cost. Any questions about those two issues? Okay. All right, so we're on page 4. Go ahead.
Okay, wait a minute, you skipped the potable water bond? Yeah.
Sorry.
So I think we can potentially plug in a number there, but I'm not sure. We would have to check with
That
Greg
was the one
Colby.
that's the one I was talking about. The
Okay,
water service incentive program?
Yes, did we,
That's the next one I'm going to talk about.
I'm sorry, I
Yeah,
preempted
It
you.
used to be on page 3, it's now on page 4, because it
Okay.
got a little bit larger.
Okay,
So I don't know if anybody has had the opportunity, we did send this out. There is new verbiage for this. The concern that I have is that we list the dollar amount twice. So if you read it pretty quickly, it may get someone to think that it's actually 900,000 versus 450,000. And then I understand that a lot of the verbiage is important to be able to ensure that the select board has the appropriate resources to be able to manage this project. But the article is awful complex. At least that was my impression. Anybody else have that same impression when you read through it?
it is cumbersome, and I totally agree with you. I think the bottom line is that the DRA is obviously going to need to approve this language. So that's really the bottom line. And Greg Colby, if you have anything to say with regards to the language on the water bond, jump in.
Well, I know it might seem cumbersome, but that is the proper wording of the warrant article when the issuance of bonds or notes, is, involved. So.
All right, so maybe it might be a good idea, Greg Talon and I were talking about maybe doing fireside chats to explain to some of the taxpayers exactly what this is, and hopefully we'll have some time to do that before the end of the year. I guess I wanted to ask you, Greg Colby, are you comfortable with attaching a $450,000 amount onto this at this point, or would you like to just hold off on that and see where we come out with it?
Well, I mean, the issue is, I'm not uncomfortable with it because the nature of issuing this twofold. One, it is the responsibility of the water department and the water users, so there is no tax impact. And two, it is debt, but we receive the money that's going to be repaid over a future time period, whether it be 10 or 15 years, which would then lessen the responsibility of the water users and lighten the load, so to speak. So I'm not uncomfortable with it.
Okay, so if you're good with that at this point, then I think we can leave that dollar figure in there at this point in time, unless we have other information down the road before we finally bring it to print. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Julie.
my interpretation is we're not actually going to borrow $450,000 up to $450,000. It's more of a $450,000 credit line, which makes the warrant article a lot different. You're saying so, it's basically in a sense, it's a loan co-signed by the town, but it's really a loan to the people trying to connect to the water line, and it's more of a credit line. So if only $100,000 was needed, you would only take out $100,000, and the interest will be paid by the customers themselves. So the way it's kind of saying, it's almost like you're going to take out $450,000, and really it's only an amount of a credit line if you need it. It's not really getting it.
That is not necessarily the case. There's two ways of borrowing the money. The one through the bond bank where you would borrow 100% of the money. The other option is, as it's mentioned, and I've seen some other language from our engineers that talk about the state revolving loan fund. The problem with that is, the state revolving loan fund is a competitive loan, and there was 82 applicants in last year and only 19 people got awarded it, and it's very competitive. So, which means we would probably be looking at borrowing the full amount from the bond bank, but then that would be a pot of money that we would then be able to loan out to potential water customers. So, does that make sense?
Well,
Yeah.
my concern is if you just take out $450,000 and you're only, let's say, using $50,000 or $100,000 at the time, you're still paying the interest on the entire $450,000. I know we had a meeting about this before, and we know that it was a very, very low rate, and we did motion to go that route. Mm-hmm. So my concern was if we take out the loan, we're paying the interest on it, but we're not really getting it back if we don't use it.
That's a big unknown at this point. We don't know how many people are going to take advantage of it, and you don't want to not borrow enough money.
Right. That's exactly what I was going to say, is that you have to come back to the voters, so you'd have to wait a whole year if you needed to go past the 450. Right. So if you basically take out 200,000 and you run out of that money, you can't take any more out until you go back to the voters.
Oh, I wasn't suggesting
delays
taking
the
a
project.
Smaller amount. I wasn't suggesting a smaller amount.
Okay.
I was just saying, well, who pays the interest on this if we don't use it, even though we take out the whole amount? But that's my concern of how the numbers work out.
At some point in time, you basically say, this program is done, is finished, and then whatever money is left over, you return that money.
And don't forget, we're going to be...
This is a finite program. This is not a continuing, is that correct, Greg?
That would be correct.
Okay, so this is only a very interim program, and once that's done, then the money can be returned. So I have less concern, because even if we don't spend it, we can give it back.
But we also have a more long-term financing that we talked about, which is when future connections, it might not be under the incentive, but still, people may say $15,000 for me to hook up my water line, and we want to add it to the bill.
Yeah.
But we have to come up with that money to pay the contractors up front, so that money has to come from somewhere.
This is,
Are we doing that this year as well?
This is the very first incentive program, and if there was a large number of users from a neighborhood or whatever, we could go off and come back to the taxpayers and do a second incentive
Well,
program.
this is the incentive. I'm talking about the regular hookups going forward after the incentive program.
you're talking about a huge unknown. I think once we
But when
get
are we
this
gonna
off
do the first
ground,
connections?
We may not need to, Julian. You're talking about a future issue that we don't have any idea about. We need to we're doing this in pieces. And so we need to get the first incentives up and running so
I
that
understand
the
that. You're
water
not
will pay
listening
for
to me.
itself.
The incentives are one thing, and it's a one-time thing, just like Greg says. I agree with that.
Yep.
But we also have to have some option to get some funds when the people pass beyond the incentive group, they want to hook up. We would have to wait another year to get a warrant article through, which wouldn't be till not this March, but the following March. Are we going to have hookups happening before that time that they may need help with?
We don't know. That's why we're taking out $450,000.
But we can't use this 400, is this 450,000, can we use this for that as well?
I
Or
would
is it
think
only
so.
for the incentive program?
My
I would think
understanding
so.
is, and maybe Greg can confirm, but it would be for anyone wanting to hook up,
Right.
regardless of if
Even
they
beyond
take
the
advantage
incentive.
of the
Right.
incentives or
Well,
not.
that's what I want to clarify, that it wasn't, that this is not only for the incentive part, it
no,
has to
no.
cover the other people as well.
Exactly.
got it.
Exactly. And then if we talk about a water expansion in the town down the road sometime, then we can review this process and do it again.
Yeah, that's way down the road.
Right, it is way down the road. Okay, so if nobody has any more issues or questions about that potable water warrant, Greg, you want to go on to the contingency fund, please? Thanks.
So last year, we took $80,000 from the unassigned fund balance for the contingency. I believe we only used it once and then found a way to back the money back out of that. And we found money inside of one of the trust funds. And so we used no money from that. And so the whole $80,000 was returned back to the common fund for the town. So we are looking at this being, again, necessary to take this out of the unassigned fund balance in case a contingency, something that's totally unplanned for, occurs in the following year. And the voters were very responsive, or very favored when they voted on this one. So I think it's a
And
good
also,
thing.
another comment to make also is, any money that we don't spend out of this gets returned back to the unassigned fund balance every
Correct.
year.
Right.
So it's just a tool in the toolbox, and
Right.
it's for emergencies. It's your cookie jar money, basically, in case you have a problem.
Yep.
Big cookie jar, though.
So we, on the next one, the P2106, we had a really extensive presentation by our fire chief and his desire to expand the coverage of AMTs, firefighters, and hazardous response personnel from the fire department. And it'll be part of his budget. Now, we've done this in a number of different ways over the years. When we are asking for actual people, we normally have done it through a warrant. But this initially will go through as a budget line item, and the purpose of this warrant is only if that budget was cut. So the budget was cut, then this warrant article would be put in to ask the voters their opinions on whether they want this 24-hour coverage. Any questions on that or any comments on that, John?
No, you're good? Okay.
Good? Okay. All right. So the next one on page 5 is create and deposit to a reevaluation capital reserve fund. The amount is $35,000. This is to allow us to have enough money set aside so that when we do a value and new analysis of our property and the town in 5 years, we would have the money to be able to afford to do that. So that's what the intent of this
Yep,
is.
and that will help you level fund the budget.
Yep.
Because if you recall, last year, we had to appropriate $140,000 to do our values anew for this year. So we're trying to avoid that by being proactive.
Yep. So in our conversations with the CIP, we did discuss quite a bit about energy, and I believe we agreed with $15,000. The only issue is whether or not we would put another warrant for Phase 2 of the solar panels. So we're still discussing that, and we still possibly could do that. We are, right now, at least thinking about putting it as a separate warrant and not tied with the energy fund. And it would basically would be probably for $45,000 this year, and then the following year, $40,000 would give us enough money to be able to finish that project. So this is, I believe there's an audit left, and there is, I don't believe there's anything else. Is there energy audit?
Tim is here, and he's our chair.
Was there an
Is there
energy
still an
audit?
energy audit left over? I don't think so. I believe you wanted to do an energy audit at the safety complex. Is that correct?
Yeah, we had talked about a couple different things. One, at the safety complex to do an LED light replacement.
Okay.
And I think Affinity, who's been our vendor to do LEDs in the buildings and the streetlights, had agreed to do an audit.
Oh, great. All right.
Then the other, we haven't talked a lot about it, but the other potential kind of audit, we did both electrical and thermal audits in the Historical Society, the Town Hall, and the library. So now that we're making better use of the former district court, we probably should have the discussion whether we want to do an audit there, as well as the fire department, part of the safety complex.
So do you know if
Just haven't
Affinity,
had that discussion yet.
is Affinity planning on charging us to do the light audit? Do you know at this point, or are they going to do it gratis?
I think they said they would do it gratis, but
Yes, all
Don't-
right, that's great.
Excellent. That's awesome.
That's great.
don't hold me to
No,
that.
no, but I know. All right, that's good news.
So that amount would be sufficient to be able to cover those things that you can think would be coming up the following year?
Yeah, I would think so, yes.
Yeah,
We, the original audit for the three buildings was about 7,700, I
Yep,
think, and we
that's
got a
right.
$3,500 rebate back, so
It was a very
Yeah,
well
so-
worth doing.
Yes.
Yeah, it was well worth
we
doing.
should be in good shape if we want to pursue that.
So I'm going to suggest that perhaps, hold on, Julian, that you may want to draft a warrant article for those solar panels, and we'll put it in, because I think our next meeting on November 30th, I'm going to ask the board to vote on these warrant articles.
Okay.
I just want to make sure everybody's clear on them first, but go ahead, Julian.
Now, I just want to add a caveat to the discussion about the old courthouse. And I know for the COVID thing, it was a solution to try to keep the traffic down at Town Hall. But after the COVID crisis, I don't know how you're going to keep an entire building for one or two little department offices. It may not be, we may have to discuss this in the future, whether we should keep or not keep that building.
Yep.
Because for one office or whatever, that's very inefficient use of the land in a building to have one office. And I think I understand why we went there. It was because of the crisis and to avoid exposure to our employees here at Town Hall. But when this COVID crisis is over, I think that's
Yep.
something we have to seriously discuss what
Yep.
we're really going to do at that building before we invest in that building.
Good point.
Right.
Good point.
So the next one is P2109, and this is a warrant to communicate to our taxpayers our waste removal agreement, basically giving them all the facts of how we would actually spend this. So we're not asking for money for this, we're basically communicating it to the legislative body that the town is entering a multi-year agreement or contract with the waste. When will we have numbers for this? Do you
Okay, so
know?
I did speak with Sumner actually today with regards, regarding the language of this and
Okay.
regarding the special meeting. And he informed me that he needs to go back to DRA on this.
Okay,
I know if we have an escape clause, which we do in both contracts, we
Yep.
only need a majority vote. But I also know there's another statute that states that if this is a critical contract to the running of the town,
still
that
a
we
majority.
don't need to do this. But I am not a lawyer, certainly, and it makes it, I get headaches when I try to read these things because they're very confusing. So I did speak to him today on that, and he will get back to us before we
Excellent.
need to make a decision, okay?
yes, Julian?
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, because we've never needed this before, and things like a trash removal, things like that, you're not ever gonna get a one-year contract. Even assessing, we don't do one-year contracts.
Right.
And if we got to the point of every time we do any service to the town, multi-year contract required this, we'd be inundated with warrant articles every single year. So I believe the answer is probably gonna be for those types of essentials
Yep.
that you don't, I think you can't go beyond 5 years or something like, you can't go, huge extended, but being limited to 1 year or even 3 is, or less than 3, I don't believe by law you're
So,
required
well,
to.
the RSA does say we need to communicate to
Yes.
the town.
Yeah.
It doesn't say whether or not they need to vote on it, so I'm not sure.
Yes,
I mean, I
communicating
have
is
a question
necessary.
myself when I read it, and it's like, we are required to communicate that, but normally we do that in a warrant.
Yeah.
If you do it in a warrant, you're asking them to vote it yes or no.
But what if they say no? And the thing is,
Right.
we've been doing this forever almost right now. That means we've been violating the law all those years. I don't think we've been violating the law.
No, and basically, it's a spirit of open and transparent
Yes.
government and letting our legislative body know that this is what you're going to be paying
Yes.
over the next few years. Greg Colby, did you have any comments or suggestions for us at this point, or?
I mean, but the one thing that I know, by taking a multi-year agreement to the voters, it allows you to increase the default budget when we determine that at the end of the year. If the voters are noticed with an agreement like this, we can increase the default budget
Okay,
versus using the previous year and trying to find the money somewhere else is what would end up happening.
But
All
then
right,
you
well, that's
risk
good.
the no means no clause taking effect.
it's only for 1 year.
Yeah,
No
but 1
means no
year
only
without
means
trash
1
pickup
year.
or whatever could be a real nasty thing.
So this warrant has a backup warrant, which is basically a special meeting to basically say, all right, you didn't vote for it. Now, what are we going to do to take care of the cost of this? So it would still end up in the budget somehow, I would believe, right? Where we would have the ability to renegotiate with the town?
Go ahead, Greg Colby.
These warrants are not raising and appropriating money. These are just long-term agreements. So if they get voted down, you still have the 1-year agreement and the money is still in the budget.
Right.
You're not raising and appropriating any money. That is still in the operating budget. So I wouldn't say that no means no in this case, because the operating budget includes the money for trash removal.
So Jay had a question also.
Go ahead, Jay.
So the RSA states we need to disseminate this to the public, so can we do this through a public hearing instead of through a warrant article?
I think that's what we're asking Sumner,
Right.
and we would certainly be happy to do that. We already have a public hearing scheduled for our assessing for November 30th, and we could always add this onto it, and I'm hoping that Sumner will have that information to us by then,
So
so
we should just
we
wait
could
on
certainly
this
do
until
that.
that time.
Yes.
Right.
I'm sorry?
Just
We should wait on these 3 until that time.
Right, the 4 of them, all right.
So on P21, 11, and 12, it's a similar type thing, and as far our assessing agreement.
And we do have contractual numbers that we did sign off on this summer, so if we do need to plug them in, I do have them
Okay.
for you from the
Good.
contract.
So next one is P2113, and this is basically to have the Board of Selectmen as agents to expend money from the Fire Department Apparatus Capital Reserve Fund. We are agents on, I believe, all the other funds.
Pretty much, I believe,
Much.
yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
Tim?
Yeah, just in going through the fire department CIP just a couple days ago, there's 2 other fire department capital reserve funds. one for the breathing apparatus and one for the radios. The radios are a fairly new one. The Board of Selectmen is not the fiscal agent on either of those.
For either one of
So
them?
if you're going to do Board of Selectmen and Fire Department capital reserves, I would think it would make sense maybe to do the three of them together.
All three of them? All
So
right,
this
that's
is-
a good
this
note.
is the radio, is it the fire radio?
Yeah, the
Fire
Fire
Department
Department
radio?
radios, yeah.
And what is the third one?
Scuba,
Scuba.
SCBA? All right.
Yeah, self-contained breathing apparatus.
All right. So if
They're
that's
similar
another,
type things.
those are two things that we probably should add on to
Okay.
our warrants as well. Okay.
All right.
All right, good.
So P2114 is, we tried to attempt to do this last year. We didn't really have some really good examples to give to the taxpayers, but right now this is being asked for 25,000, up from 15, and the communication has to do with computer servers, fiber networks, and installing barriers to ransomware attacks. So it basically explains that this is an infrastructure. It's not buying software. It's buying something to keep us safe. Both Methuen and Salem both have been hit by ransomware and shut down both towns.
And I believe Mark told us that there was a $300,000
Yep.
price tag for one of the towns to get their information back. So it's a $25,000 investment to save $300,000, I guess.
So last year, we basically had this is for 2115, we had a warrant to be able to cover the forms, all the paperwork associated with the putting a cap on the Plaistow landfill. This year is an amount of money to be able to actually do the construction, so actually to do the work. So all the engineering has been done, they have a plan for all of this, and now we would take $150,000 out of the unassigned fund balance and actually do the work on the town. So this is a construction warrant for that effort.
And go ahead, Jay.
Greg,
Yes.
did Mark go to RFP for the construction?
I was just going to mention that, yes, I believe he did. Mark, can you chime in and just tell us a little bit about that? Thank you.
Yes. So I had told you last week that we were finalizing all of the information for the RFP. We have vetted it through legal counsel, and it is on the town's website now. And it is an RFP for the construction costs. And I do have to just throw my 2 cents worth in. It's not going to be 150,000. It's going to be substantially more than 150,000. That is what the price to do the construction is going to be several hundred thousand, or, north of $500,000.
So we should probably leave this as a placeholder at this point until you formalize the RFPs.
Well, I did formalize the RFPs. We're going to wait for the results to come back from the RFPs, and you will have that results, assuming people, decide to participate in the proposals. You'll have that number, and I'll bring all of the RFPs results to the board, and then you can plug the number in.
Okay, that's great, thank you. Go ahead, Julian.
I have a concern, if it gets up to those kind of numbers, essentially our plan or intent this year was to not put any large warrant articles in this year. That would be a significant amount, maybe that should be done over a couple of years.
Yes, exactly, that's
Not all
exactly
at
what the
once.
intent was. Yep, you're right, you're totally right about that. Because obviously, we're not going to be spending 700 grand in a year to get this done. It will be done in phases over a couple of years, absolutely.
So should we also rename this to like phase 1, phase 2 type of
Let's
deal?
leave it as a
what the
placeholder
plan
and
is.
wait and see what
Because
comes out of
they
it.
may not be able to phase out the work either. It
Well,
might be
yeah, so
something,
let's-
it's an all-in-one
Yep.
type of situation, so we might have to phase out raising the money, but
Okay.
Yeah,
Let's
so
wait
let's
and
just
see.
leave it as a placeholder, and then I think we could have a more substantive discussion out once Mark gives us some real numbers on
Yeah,
this.
realistic plan without
Right.
asking it all this year.
Exactly,
So-
exactly.
Currently, the last one that we have is this P2116. It's a non-money warrant, and it's basically to reduce the membership of the Budget Committee from 9 members down to 8 members. And the purpose of that is with the Selectmen's representative being a voting member, it creates 10. So you basically have an even number. You could have ties. So this was requested by the Budget Committee. They want to go from 9 down to 8 so that the Selectmen's vote would make 9, would be an odd number.
Yeah.
It's rather maybe odd or something, but the last few years, we've never had 9.
Right.
Because either
Well, they were
somebody
missing-
left or they
They're
were
missing 2?
ill or something. Yeah.
They were missing 2.
They haven't been able to even keep 9.
members.
Right, right.
Just
So-
happened to come out that way.
So that's an easy do, as
Yeah.
far as I'm concerned. I don't think that would be an issue. Before we end this, though, one more warrant article was requested to be put on. It's another non-monetary warrant article, and it was proposed by Mr. Jim Peck, and he asked if we could put in a motion or a warrant to create a heritage commission. And basically what this would do is this would be an advisory board to the planning board that would be able to preserve some of our historical buildings and lands within the town of Plaistow. And the warrant article indicates that we would, the Board of Selectmen would be able to appoint up to 5 people on this commission and appoint up to 5 alternates for the commission, too. This is considered a land use board, and so because it's a land use board, only 1 member of the planning board is allowed to be on this commission. So that's something that this board will have to keep in mind when you go to appoint people for this Heritage Commission. So I have the language here, and I will give that to you, Greg, also. I think you have that.
So can we ask questions of this?
Yeah, I hope I can answer them.
Okay. So the question I have on this is that you just said you related it as advisory, but if you read all the material that came with it, it's basically saying some heritage commissions can buy land, can raise money, can do lots of other things. So I want to be very clear, what is the purpose of this? And are we establishing an advisory committee to the planning? And I would be 100% in support of that. Or are we basically creating this own little entity that will be dealing with money and purchasing of land and whatnot?
Okay.
The way I read it was you could establish it both ways. So you
Yeah.
could, my opinion is, maybe at this point it's advisory, just because, there's no money right now set aside for, making something a heritage site currently, but that could be something we could plan for.
And I believe it requires 2 different warrants, one to establish the commission,
Yep.
and a second one to establish the fund, and I crisscrossed off the one to I'm sorry, and this wasn't the one that I originally sent out this morning. I revised it, and it somehow didn't get here,
Yep.
and that's my fault, but to not establish a fund for it at this point.
Okay.
We just talked about prioritizing our expenditures and our taxable warrants. And,
Okay.
this is not even close to being ready for funding, in my personal opinion.
Okay.
So, so if
Just
we can
those-
establish a commission, that will be.
And the
good.
heritage fund will cross out.
Yep, cross out the fund. So, I'm sorry, go ahead, Julian.
Yeah, I was reading all this today, and there's a couple of red flags on this, because what we don't want is more bureaucracy. We have enough of that in upper government, and it makes things very inefficient. But one of the things that says that they can hire consultants and contractors that are needed. That takes money and funding. And also, there's another part that says, while their primary duties are to advise and assist other local boards and commissions, including the planning board, heritage commissioners are also empowered to accept and expend funds for non-lapsing heritage fund and to acquire and manage property and property rights.
Right.
That's serious. That's a lot of power to be put into
It is, but if there is
a bunch of
no,
assigned people. They're not elected, they're assigned.
right, and if there is no funding at this point
Right.
for that, that negates a lot of those empowerments, as it
Well, I was
were.
just saying, let's say theoretically,
Yeah.
I don't want to interrupt, but theoretically, someone donates money to them, because I saw
Yes,
that in here.
yes, someone
And then
can
they
donate
decide to
money to-
buy town property, and then they say it's a historical landmark, and then does it get tax-free exemption? Now it starts affecting the finances of the town, and it also starts taking pieces of our community, and now they're owned by this heritage community, so to speak. And now it's affecting the well-being, or it has an effect of affecting the entire community. Beyond just trying to, retain, I think, the original intent of it, people will think is, let's preserve some of our history.
Yes.
But it can go far beyond that, and it's subject to possible abuse. And some of these things I'm reading, it scares me a little bit.
And,
So it's
and
hard,
that,
yeah.
all the more reason why when you appoint members to this commission, you vet them very carefully. And I know, John, you had a comment about this?
Well, this commission wouldn't be subsidized by the town or the
No.
taxpayers.
No, only if there was a warrant to fund part of this for for the commission, and we don't have that warrant in for this year. Now, I believe that the commission can accept donations, so if somebody wanted to donate $100,000 to it, absolutely, but it's just like all the other warrant articles. It needs to be funded in order for them to be empowered to spend money.
I don't believe they can accept donations until they have a fund established. So my concern is, if we put this thing through, then next year, a citizen's position can create the Heritage Fund.
All right,
And
Yeah.
so now the Heritage Fund is created, and now they can start accepting donations, or they can ask for an appropriation to this from the
right,
taxpayers.
that's correct.
So I get the purpose of this, and as an advisory committee to the planning board, it makes sense. Just like Julian, I'm
Laura
very
said we give them a little more
concerned
power than we
about,
want.
what's the word I'm looking for? Will this get out of control very quickly? It's really not the intent. It should not be the intent. We're a small town. I mean, if you're Portsmouth, yes, I can understand having a very, very large organization like this with their own funding and funds to take care of it, but we're a small little town. I'm just very, very concerned about putting this in place, and then the fund comes next, and then you basically have no control of it at all.
Go ahead, Jay.
Was Jim Peck supposed to be here tonight?
He was not well.
Okay.
He was not feeling well. He was supposed to be here for the DOT meeting. I did ask him if he would be kind enough to come in on November 30th if we want, and that's a question I want to throw out the board. If you want, I will invite him in remotely or whatever, and he can explain this to us if you
But
would like to
I
do that.
think part of this came up with regard to the building at, where is it, Wentworth Ave?
On the
You know,
border.
On the border.
Yes.
So the old, mortgage
Mortgage
company,
place
whatever.
with a big white lighted sign.
It's an old meeting house, and I think it's gonna be torn down.
No, actually, the
That's
demo
gonna be-
permit was pulled, so we dodged a bullet on
So I
that.
think that probably started this ball
Yes.
rolling.
Yep.
Was to try to set up something so we can mitigate that from happening again
Right.
to some of our heritage
Yep.
sites in our town.
Yes,
So I share your concerns about it, once you set that fund up, then, it opens up the door. But I think it's to start preserving some of our heritage sites within the
Yeah.
town.
John, you had a comment, go ahead.
Yeah, you're right, it could get out of control, like you're talking about the old mortgage specialist. Well, if this was deemed a historical site for the town, now what? They want to raise money to buy it. Then,
Well, I think what it can do is it can allow us to protect the building's integrity and not have it torn down, or if they're going to remodel it, they have to remodel it within certain
Parameters, yeah.
constraints
Yep.
without affecting the integrity of the
Of the structure.
heritage of the building and stuff like
owners will
that,
be
so.
in a situation where they can't do what they want with what they own. And sometimes that's not a good thing.
Right. But I've seen this in other states where they have it. And, I knew someone that actually lived in a building that was like that, and they were constrained with what they could do to remodel it, and they had to go to like the city to get, proper approvals and all that, so, I think it's just to protect our heritage sites, but
So, Board, would you like me to ask Jim Peck to come in to speak to us on the 30th regards to this warrant article?
Yes,
All right, I will
definitely.
make sure that I do that, and go ahead,
Yeah, I just
Julian,
want to
one
say,
more question, we're going to move
that
on.
Mortgage, I think it was mortgage specialist?
Yep.
Yeah, I have not actually been inside that building, but someone has already told me, because they came up during a discussion during election, and we were talking about it, and they said basically, yes, the only part of that building that was really the original was the outside appearance, kind of, the inside had already been gutted and changed and everything else. So what are you preserving at that point? So I don't know why the thing was pulled or whatever, and I'm not going to get involved.
I don't know either.
I'm not doing
I
all the
don't know either,
research.
yeah.
But there's some, the thing is, when you give people a certain power and they happen to be enthusiastic about it, and I like to see it's an RSA, it's not just a committee, you're making an ad hoc charter. This is an RSA. And once you open the door and you say, yes, you can do it, and if the RSA says something, they have the power, the barn door has been opened, and there ain't nothing you can do about it. It's like giving a service in a town. Once you give it, you can't take it away. It never happens. It never happens. So you got to be very cautious with this.
All right, so he will come before the board on the 30th to explain to you, and you clearly have a right to vote for or against it, and, or even whether to put it on the warrant in the first place. I mean, if 4 of us decide against it, it probably isn't going to even make it onto the warrant. So I will make sure that he gets here. In the meantime, you guys think about that.
I think the
And-
intent is good, like large
I
cities, like
understand
Greg
that.
says, but maybe, we're a small town. I think
know.
our planning board, our conservation commissions, and our zoning board, that's what we put them there, to protect our community. So,
All right, we got it. All right, so I'm going to move on to the, if you were all set with the warrant articles, one more thing, Jay?
2 more things.
right.
Like, you could always just create a subcommittee of the planning board. You don't have to go this far in creating a heritage commission. You could create a historical subcommittee potentially.
Well, I think the intent was to be able to have some teeth to be able to preserve, some of the historical stuff
A subcommittee
within the
could also
town.
make recommendations to the selectmen
yep.
to
Yep,
have teeth as well. So,
Okay.
if that's another option.
okay.
Is there a date on when we need to have the warrant articles finalized? Because
I-
I know, I wasn't at the last rec commission meeting, but I know there had been discussion about a warrant article. So, rather than, maybe we need to reach out to Bill or the rec commission and just find out when they're going to submit that and get it to
Okay.
Greg to put it on the list.
Good point, good
So-
point. So what I would like to do, if this board is agreeable to it, is to be able to vote on the current articles that we have right now, and if Bill Coy can get in a request for a warrant article with language to us before then, we can discuss it and vote on it on the 30th.
Sure.
So if you could take care of that, since you're our liaison for the rec commission, that would be great. And I would love to be able to finalize everything by, if we meet on November 30th, I think our next meeting's not until the 14th of December. So we need to nail all this stuff down. We need to nail the budget down. We need to nail the warrants down. So the 30th is probably our last ditch effort to do this before we turn it over to the budget committee too, because they have to vote too.
Did you give them, did you set a date when they would have the warrants, the budget committee?
No, I did not. I wanted to make sure we were able to vote and move this forward by November 30th, and I think they're still going to be in budget meetings by then, but they need to have those warrants, I think, by the first part of December.
Okay.
In my opinion, they should have some time to look at it.
And what would be the target date of getting the voter's guide out?
Greg, can you help us out with that? I think the voter's guide doesn't need to go out until, what, the end of January or so?
Right before election.
That's after.
Yeah, and
No.
actually, yeah.
I thought we usually have it around the first to middle of January.
Okay. The voter's guide?
I think with the warrant article's got to be
No,
done,
no,
but not the
voters-
voter's guide.
Articles will have to be discussed at the deliberative session, so there may be changes to the warrant articles.
Right. So I'm guessing maybe, yeah, after deliberative, I think next year is February 6th. So I think after deliberative session, the voter's guide should go out with any changes on it. Does that sound about right to you? I'd have to check my calendar.
We're voting on the 9th.
I,
That's a very short period of time.
What, March 9th?
March 9th.
Right, so February 6th is deliberative, so we have
So
less
we'd
than
have
a
to
month to
right
get
out-
it together.
Right after any changes are
Right,
made in the
right.
deliberative session and get that out, and that would give approximately 30 days for the
Right.
voters to get a copies of this.
And as far as the voter's guide is concerned, I think we could flesh out 99% of it. It's very little changes. If the legislative body decides they want to make changes to the warrants, it'd just be a tweak. So
Yeah.
it wouldn't be like we'd have to create the whole document from scratch.
Yeah, the preliminary copy, the majority of it should be ready for, before deliberative, so
Right.
people can get an idea. That will help them for the deliberative session. And then
Exactly.
if there's any changes to the warrant article itself, you can
Right.
put out the
Yeah.
final mass copies, so to speak, after deliberative is over.
All right, so we all set with all of this?
We're good.
Yes? Okay. Moving on. Oh, go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, I think we've typically tried to have the voter's guide ready for the budget public hearing, which is
January
January
16th, I
20
think.
something
Yeah,
or other.
Yeah, all right.
So that gives them,
Okay.
a week or so ahead of the deliberative session to look at it and study it. And then as
Okay,
Greg
we can
mentioned
do
earlier.
I bet you we could do that.
January 16th?
I think it's either January 16th or the 19th, and I don't remember, but Max will have that. It's January 12th, all right. Yeah, Max will know that.
And that's the budget review?
That's a public hearing for the budget, right? All right. All right, so if we're all done, are we all done?
No, I'd just like to make a suggestion for
Sure.
the voter's guide, and it's, I know this is the early copy.
Yep.
What we've, in the past, because other people were against it, I'd like to see a little bit on certain ones. There even could be a little history on what this type of warrant article did in the past. Like, if you did an energy project, for instance, this is what we saved on this energy project in the past. There are other things, like what do we do with the fire department one? And, it's our fire truck over so many years, we got the fire truck. And I think we're finding out maybe our insurance rates on our homes may go down, depending on what our new status is going to be. The fire chief will probably fill us in on that. So there's a little thing of some previous members of the board opposed those kind of facts. And I think they're useful facts. They're not lies. They're truthful facts. Just to say, these are what these things are for, because other people don't follow this every day. It gives them a little idea, what is it they're voting for or not voting for.
So you know
can be
what?
more, you can
Yeah.
have a better explanation inside of the voter's guide
Yeah.
versus inside of the actual warrant itself.
Yes.
But you still have to be very careful, because you can't go over the line of
Electioneering.
exactly.
Right, but as long as you put real
You can-
facts in
So
place.
if the facts are related to that particular warrant and what you're asking the town to do and why you're asking the town to do that, I think you're okay.
Yep.
But if you start going off to other things,
Right.
that's when I think you kind
And
of sway.
if you have
You're absolutely
suggestions,
correct. It's just that it went too far to the caution.
Yes.
Where you actually were limiting good information.
if you
That was-
have
yeah.
suggestions that you'd like to add to the voter's guide, by all
Very, very
means, give
open
them
for
to
that.
Greg.
Absolutely.
All right? Yeah.
We just had a-
Please
I
do.
tried the other times, and they failed.
All right, well, he's
That was
very.
prior to you being on the board, by
He's
the
very
way.
cooperative about that, so I think we're
Yeah.
going to move on. We've, I think, discussed this
Okay.
beyond the beyond. So I believe we have Brian from Casella, who is remoting in because he wanted to be available to answer any questions that the board may have with regards to the trash contract decision. So as you may recall, I've been going back and forth with them, kind of renegotiating some of the terms. And I provided for you last week a little spreadsheet of what we had discussed. We had reduced originally the annual increase from 4.5% to 4%, but the base rate went up to $343,000. So I asked them to come back with a 3.5% per annum increase, and they did that, but the base rate went up to $349,000. So I did the spreadsheet for you guys, and so it looks as if with the 4% trash, only 4% increase with that 196-gallon container, we're looking at $118,000, a little over that, over the course of 5 years, as opposed to the 3.5% increase with $103,000 $523 over a 5-year increase. So basically, the decision that we need to make tonight, gentlemen, is do you want to engage Casella in one of these proposals, and we'll move forward with the finer tuning of this contract, or do you want me to just scrap it and send out a new RFP? Because we need to make this decision tonight because time's clicking by. So, John, could I get your thoughts on whether you want to go with one of these proposals or go to an RFP?
Well, I'd like to go to an RSP and see if we can get some more opinions on this.
Okay,
This is something very expensive, and
it is.
and we didn't get a lot of feedback, and I don't know why, and we should try, at least give it another shot.
Okay, all right. Julian, what are your thoughts?
I'm leaning toward going to RFP. The reason is, I know we talked about options for offering recycling if it's not in the main pickup, but I didn't see anything in black and white. This is how much, if somebody wanted to have recycling, we talked about this, how much would it cost me in black and white? Not, well, maybe it'll cost 120, maybe it'll cost 150, because I know a lot of people in this community still want to recycle, and they might want to do it. I know you're going to put dumpsters and things, but there are a lot of people that aren't going to want to take that ride every week or whatever to the pickup point, and they would rather have it picked up, and yes, they'll save on their tax bill, but they're willing to pay for it. And those people are the people who are serious about recycling. They will actually do it.
Right.
They're probably doing it now. It's just that they're not the majority of the people according to the numbers we've gotten. So I'd like to see that option in there. Or even if it's another company, what other company is on the list? Because I don't want to tell the people, oh, we're going to do this non-recycling, and then we're working on something, and then it doesn't work out. I
Well,
think that'd be
I'm gonna
kind
be
of a
honest with
failure
you,
on our
Julie.
part, that we don't give them another option.
I'm not going to be able to do this all by myself, and I would really love it if you could
Yeah.
help me
Yeah.
and start looking at companies that would do a fee for service for recycling, and I
And
believe
I was
it's called a
hoping that
subscription
maybe
service.
someone like Casella could lead,
Well,
could point us in a
he's
direction.
here right now to answer
Yeah.
questions, but that is one of the questions, because
Yeah.
I couldn't get a commitment from Casella to say yes or no at this point. But we have 2 for RFPs. Jay, what are your thoughts? You want to do RFP, or do you want to stay with the proposal that we have?
Come back to me.
All right, I'll come back to you quick. Greg, what are your thoughts?
So I believe we asked an awful lot of questions and a lot of options to
Yes, we
the first
did.
pass.
Yes,
And I
we
think
did.
we have cleared that all up, and we now know distinctively what it is that we are looking for. And I think that we are not only looking for one thing, I think we're looking for 2 things. We're looking for a trash removal contract, and I believe we should be sending out a second RFP for a subscription service for recycle. So in other words, if there are companies out there that do this, we should send out an RFP to say, all right, we're serious, we want to do this, and the subscription, the people who want to sign up for it will end up paying for the program. I don't think putting in, trash barrels and containers through the town is going to help recycle. If people don't recycle at their curb, they're not going to recycle there. So I'd rather have people who are really serious about recycling have a service that they can sign up for. And I think it's up to us to be able to put out the RFP saying we're serious for this, we want this as a service within our town, even if it's not going to be
Taxpayer
costing the
funded,
town.
right,
Correct.
okay.
So that's kind of where I'm sitting right
All
now.
right, so are you leaning more towards 2 RFPs again? And Jay, you want to weigh in on this now?
It's tough.
No, I wasn't gonna go ahead with Casella, I was gonna go for another RFP as well. I just think when we did the RFP originally, there was a lot of different pieces.
Yeah,
And we kept adding, and, the recycling option, I think we need to find something that is gonna work for the town. A last-ditch effort of putting a dumpster somewhere to go drop stuff off on the weekend. I think we can do better than that, so I'm gonna go with the RFP. So.
All right, okay, so it looks as if there's pretty much a majority to scrap the proposal, but Brian, I definitely want to give you an opportunity to speak to the board and let us know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
We can, thank you, yes.
Okay. Well, first of all, appreciate the opportunity to be in discussions with, for Casella to provide a proposal for solid waste removal in the town of Plaistow. I think a couple things that I just want to reiterate just to the board is first of all, that Casella has submitted its proposals in a competitive environment. There's obviously other competitors that submitted pricing for this work. The point and notion regarding the subscription service. So just so you understand, it's a very difficult thing. The last thing we will want to do is provide an unrealistic price to a resident in Plaistow. You know, we have to go out there and get a truck. We have to hire an employee. We have to pay for the disposal of that material. And really depending, and then you're going to offer a program that is going to be dependent on the direction that the town decides to go with their contracted solid waste disposal program. We'll be providing a non-contracted service to the residents. The resident will have the liberty to elect or eliminate that service at any point, which puts a lot of risk on the service provider. And so the last thing we wanted to do is, when you typically have a lot of risk like that, you have to protect yourself a little bit with price. And we just do not want to provide and put out there an unrealistic price to the residents. There's a lot of different ways to tie somebody's shoe. There's a lot of different ways to provide a thoughtful recycling program to the town. Maybe subscription service, maybe small containers placed throughout the community. There's a lot of different options. Our goal at Casella was to solidify the MSW contract, which is what the town elected to do, was to eliminate the recycling collection program and just do an MSW collection. I heard at the start that there was disparity in pricing. When Casella originally provided a proposal, that pricing for the MSW collection was in combination of also providing a recycle service as well. And when we look at our pricing, we look at everything holistically. So the cost of the trash collection, the cost of recycle collection, your MSW disposal costs, your recycle disposal costs, and all of that is looked at as an entire package with the amount of capital that we're going to be investing into this project. Once the town decided to eliminate that recycle aspect of the program, we then had to relook our numbers and again, provide the most competitive rate. Casella is putting a lot of risk on this proposal. We've made some very aggressive operational assumptions. We understand the financial constraints that communities and municipalities are in Southern New Hampshire right now. We provide this service in a lot of communities, and we're very thoughtful about that. We have employees that actually reside in Plaistow. So to that effect, we wanted to provide the most competitive rate for the MSW only collection. We did have to add in the addition of the 110% performance bond that was not originally in the RFP, which also impacted the base rate pricing. The other thing that I want to indicate that it's a little bit different than your current program is that the MSW, our collection costs, the way this program was going to be set up is that the 24 locations around town that has small containers, those containers were going to be converted from what you currently have, which is a rear load container. So it's picked up by the truck that's currently en route, and converting those to front load containers. Those front load containers and the cost of that collection and the cost of disposal was all incorporated into our base rate. So the town would actually see a bit of savings on the disposal cost because you no longer would be subject to the disposal costs of those 24 locations. That's all included into your base rate. We also didn't include any rental truck charges into this. We tried to keep it as straightforward and realistic and for the town so that there was no real hidden costs. And then lastly, you know, with the startup of these, and anytime you're initiating a new contract, there's going to be costs associated with us initiating the new program in town. You know, whether that's extra labor, extra trucks to ensure that we're picking up the town in a timely manner before we, you know, get everything underneath us, as well as assisting the town in communicating and providing all the brochures and literature to initiate a new solid waste program and converting from manual to automated. So obviously a lot goes into it. A lot of thought goes into our pricing. At the end of the day, again, we understand the financial constraints that communities are under. We understand the fact that we're also providing proposal in a competitive environment. And so we provide our most thoughtful pricing forward to the community in hopes of creating a partnership between Casella and the town of Plaistow.
Well, we really appreciate all the effort and the work that you have done for this, but I also want to make it clear that we are also assuming a considerable amount of risk as well. We have a very, very low recycling rate in this town, and the addendum that you gave us, which adjusted your prices monthly based on our recycling, is something that we cannot predict with any degree of certainty either. And so we assume risk as well. And on your website, you do have a tab that says a subscription service. So I feel as if it was almost like a little bit of a bait and switch where it's like, well, we have this service, but we're not going to offer it to you. So so please understand that you know, we're making multi-million-dollar decisions for our taxpayers right now, and we want to make the best deal that we possibly can for them. So if the board is of a mind to do another RFP, we can clean it up and we can streamline it and we can send out a second RFP just only for recycling, and you are more than welcome to bid on it. But I think the board's decision to go with an RFP is something that we have to abide by. Go ahead, Julian.
Yeah, I have one question and one suggestion. The one question would be to the man from Casella.
Brian.
Is $120 to $150 a year a reachable cost for someone just to have recycling picked up, or is that totally out to lunch somewhere?
Again, I need to stress this comment, and this is the difficult piece for us being a private hauler, is that the town is going to be asking a hauler to provide pricing or a commitment to provide a service for one type of material, and that type of material is recycling, which the reason that material, that there's the ability to provide that service is because the town has decided to eliminate that program. We don't know what that participation rate will look like. And, you know, we will be, again, all the resources that are associated with providing that service. If the town were to elect to reactivate a recycling program, it would put us at significant risk. And, you know, you look at the capital cost of a truck. Right now, we don't offer a subscription. You know, typically we don't offer subscription services in communities that have historically provided a municipal curbside collection through a contract. We do provide subscription services in other areas of southern New Hampshire where municipal contracts aren't in effect. So I don't know if I'm saying it the right way, but obviously there's, you know, we understand the position the town's in again, and we understand it. But it's gonna be very difficult for us to lay down a price for that type of service, really not knowing what it's going to look like and how long that program would be available for us to have customers participating in that program.
Yes, and we also have that exact same concern on the flip side of it. Go ahead, Greg.
So, Brian, the question I would have to ask is there a critical mass? There are other towns in New Hampshire that do have these types of services. and they all have a minimum requirement of X number of people subscribing to it before they offer the service. And that's reasonable, and I understand that. But it doesn't sound, I'm not getting from you that this is doable or that.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, right, it's going to be competitive for us. There's no reason another private hauler can't come in there and provide pricing $5 lower than ours. And then just, just the example, right? We say, okay, we need 150 customers. And these 150 residents have decided that, hey, we're going to go ahead and set up a subscription service with Casella, which typically there's no contracts associated with it. And then I have company B that sees, hey, I'm a small guy. This town has now provided an opportunity for me to provide a subscription service. I'm going to go ahead and provide pricing $5 less than Casella, and then just take all those customers. There's nothing that we as a company could do about that, because it's just going to create a competitive landscape. It's just. I apologize that we can't give a solid answer, but we have to, all those factors are taken into consideration on providing that type of subscription service in town.
One more question for
I'll
you,
make my
Brian. Julian, go ahead.
possible suggestion. We could go with the contract with Casella for just the trash, and then we can go out to RFP, which would include Casella and anybody else, just like Greg says, and do that as an RFP so that we can get, offers from different companies who would want to provide the service to just pick up on contract, for our residents.
Right.
I mean, you know what I'm saying, trying to say?
Yes, that's exactly right.
We don't have to stop this in its dead stop.
Well, 3 other board members voted to go to RFP.
We didn't really vote. We were just getting our opinions at this point. We didn't really vote. We got our opinions.
Is there a consensus that you want to go back to RFP for 2 separate things or not?
Yes.
Yes?
Both?
Yes or no, Jay?
I just said yes.
All right, what did you say? All right, so,
Yes, but so the problem is we don't know how many people would recycle.
well, right, I think
different
the
RFP.
solution is a good one where we have 2 separate RFPs. We do one strictly for trash, and then we find a smaller vendor that would do subscription service for recycling, because I know towns do that. And anybody is welcome to bid and do that. I guess the decision that we need to make tonight is to either move forward with Casella or to scrap it and start from scratch. And from what I'm hearing from this board, you want to start from scratch and issue out 2 different separate RFPs. And Brian, you're more than welcome to bid on the new RFP, of course. I know you've done so much work for us, and you've worked really hard in trying to get us to where we are tonight. But I think that's what I'm hearing from this board. Is that correct?
Well, my question is, what do we have to gain by just doing the trash part again? We've already seen different contractors. We've made our choice based on not doing recycling.
The original RFP that we
What
sent
do we have to
out-
gain from redoing that part of the RFP? I understand the recycling, the contract recycling part needs to be its own. But what do we gain by redoing the whole thing?
Well, if you recall, when this board met with me in July, you had 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different caveats to the RFP. What if we do it this way, but what if we do it that way? 3-year with a 2-year extension, a 5-year. You had a whole bunch of caveats to all of these RFPs. And over the last couple of months, we have distilled it down to, we have 1 cart that is going to be automated. We have this, we have this. So the RFP that's going to be generated this time around is going to be cleaner and simpler. You drove me crazy, and I'm sure you drove all the other vendors crazy asking all these questions, but now it's been distilled into a complete and simple form. And so that's what the reason is for us to resend this.
So let me just say that we learned.
Excuse me, wait.
We learned during this process. None of us were experts in doing contracts for waste removal. We had to learn this process. So we were in this process and learning as we went along. That's the reason why we gave you so many different options, because we were not sure. Now I think going through this process, it's much, much clearer. And what we want to offer for the town is two separate things: a very economical waste removal and a voluntary subscription service for recycle.
Okay, what were you going to say?
Well, I was pretty much going to say the same thing. I understand the process, why you want to do both, but the only thing is, we probably want to get the trash part sooner, the regular trash sooner, because we have to figure out the numbers for the budget.
All right,
So
so this is why
We
we're
need to have something
discussing
for the
this
budget, for the
tonight.
budget committee. We don't have nothing yet. We have no number.
This is why we're discussing this tonight.
So
So if
this
you
has to be
tell,
accelerated,
if
and
you
the other
tell-
part can be later.
yes, Julian, if you tell me tonight you want a new RFP, I will generate it and bring it over to Sumner for review tomorrow morning. I've already potentially worked on one just in case the situation happened. It'll take approximately a month for people to get back to us, which brings us to mid-December, which means we need to make a decision on the company before the end of the year.
Yes.
We still have technically 6 months to put together a contract, and the only thing that's stopping us now is a budget estimate.
Yes.
All right, so we can do this, and that's why I started this process a year ago, just exactly for this reason, but we can't be equivocating on these little minutiaes. We have to make a decision.
Right.
Go ahead, Jay.
So we all weighed in. What are your thoughts on this? Do you want to scrap
Me?
it and go with another RFP? Yes. Or do you want to move forward? What was your thoughts?
I think I really like listening to you guys, and I really think I like the fact that we could put out 2 separate RFPs. And I know, like I said, there are subscription services available in other towns. And so I'm going to start tagging those towns to ask them for that type of service. But I think if we can streamline this RFP, it's not going to be a 14-page RFP. It's going to be very straightforward. We'll send it out within the week. I don't even know if Sumner needs to review it, because the only thing we're going to change is the terms of it. The body of it, the legal body of it, will be consistent. So we can get that out, and I can have you guys, I can get it out actually before our meeting. You don't need to approve the RFP, but I can get that out within a week, and we can have the due date by mid-December, by our December 14th meeting. We can open up the bids then, and we have a week to make a decision, and we still have 6 more months beyond that. Don't forget, we don't have to make this decision until, next year, and we have 6 months' worth of budget numbers that we know for a fact from JRM. So we still have time to do this, but we don't have a lot of time to do this. So I guess I'm with you guys about the 2 different RFPs. That's my thought.
It's not just about us making a decision. The companies involved have to get equipment and stuff, so it has to be done quick.
Well,
Because we've talked
We
about
will
this
do it
before.
quick.
There's a big leeway that they might have to get new equipment or trucks or whatever.
Right.
Which they can't do overnight, because a lot of these things are custom made, just like our fire department trucks.
Right.
It isn't like, you can't go down to the used car lot and buy a truck.
and that's
So-
exactly why I am telling you guys, you guys need to make a decision.
Yeah,
We can
All
do
right.
that.
let's do it.
We'll do that.
So we're going to.
Make a decision, absolutely.
All right, so you want to go with 2 RFPs, correct?
Yep.
All right, I'll get that right out this week. And Brian, thank you so much for all of your hard work and for meeting with us. And I will send out this RFP, obviously, to you as well if you wish to rebid it. But I think we can manage to do this within an appropriate amount of time. And I also think our budget number of $771,000 for the trash contract is pretty close to what we're going to be looking for.
Okay.
All right, so I guess we're all set with that. So good night, Brian, thank you so much. We appreciate your time in here. And so we're running behind schedule here. Our next item agenda is COVID-19 protocols. And I'm going to turn that over to Mark because he has some correspondence for us to look at. And I'd like him to explain that, as well as we have some correspondence as well.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chairman. So in your package tonight, you have a letter dated November 12th from the health officer as we transition into what I'm referring to as COVID-19 2.0. As you know, COVID is now surging around the country and also here in New Hampshire. And there was a second memo on the same day from Human Resources, just to expand off of the health officers with respect to the employees and what's expected from employees. And as you know, I consulted with you and the vice chairman and asked if you would bring to the board for consideration for the third part of this memos to capture the other part of the personnel, which is the elected and appointed members of boards and committees, and to reinforce what is expected in town buildings, and that the elected and appointed officials would comply with what we put in place, both the health officer and the human resources. So what you have before you tonight is just a suggested draft, should the board take action tonight, that would give the town manager the option to just approach the people that are not complying and let them know that there is a policy from the Board of Selectmen for the elected and appointed people, and that if they didn't or they refused to comply, that I would contact the board chair or vice chair or any member of the board, and that the board would become involved with making the decision on how to handle any elected or appointed members that were refusing to comply with what we're putting in place for all of the town employees.
Can I ask a question, Mark?
Sure.
If you had an individual, independent whether they are elected or appointed or just a citizen of the town, and they are in violation of not wearing a mask, don't we have the authority to be able to direct that person to leave the building?
Okay, so I would say that as a town manager, I have the jurisdiction over the people that come into the hall, into the town buildings that are residents, and we could exclude them for violating the policy, and in the same for employees. But the third leg of this stool is the elected or appointed people in town that I don't think I would have the I don't think I would have the authority to mandate their removal.
We have guidance from the state, from the governor's office. We basically
No.
we have from the state of New Hampshire basically saying that all staff will wear face masks at all time.
The difference being staff and
Staff.
appointed and elected officials.
We are not staff, we're elected.
Well, all right, I get that. It just seems very, very strange that anybody coming into a town building would not have to comply with this mandate. It doesn't make any sense. And when I expressed
it's
the concern,
it's been happening for the last 6 or 7 months. We do get people that refuse to comply.
Go ahead, Jay, you had a comment?
Well, it was along the lines of Greg was saying, like, if committees are coming in here and meeting and they're in the town hall, that's within your jurisdiction they're in the building, right? So wouldn't you have that jurisdiction to say, you need to wear a mask, because there's signs on the front door that said masks are required for anyone that comes in the building. So as long as you're in here, I would assume you would have that authority, but I guess it's not in an RSA somewhere.
I would not assume that as a town manager, I have the authority to order any elected or appointed people to do anything.
It's basically incumbent upon this board to take a leadership position, to be examples not only to the townspeople and the citizens, but also to our elected and appointed officials. If we're not going to take that leadership role, we can't ask them to do it as well. And my thinking is that I'm hoping that this would be something that would be rectified immediately if Mark's in the building and he sees an elected or an appointed official in here without a mask. I'm sure that if he asks politely, I'm sure they would do that. But if not, we really need to keep our taxpayers safe. We need to keep us safe. And if people are not going to follow the rules and regulations, we need to make sure that they do not hurt the rest of the town. It's not an unreasonable thing to do. There are other mechanisms whereby people can remote in if they don't want to wear a mask, or they can take care of town business remotely if they need to do so.
I guess the issue, Francine, is
And you
the
know,
town,
you
the
need
town
to put your
clerk,
mask on.
the town, yeah, well, I'm trying to talk. The town clerk does not report to us.
No, nor does she report to Mark, nor does the tax collector, nor do we technically report to Mark either. This is just a show of solidarity with our health inspector and with our HR director, that we are all in this together.
And I think we're in agreement that we want this, that we want to do whatever we can to make this happen.
Yeah.
It's just that if someone's still refusing, it just seems totally strange to me that we cannot direct that person to leave the building.
Oh, we certainly can, but we're not going to be present here all the time. And I guess that's what the issue is, you know, as a town employee, Mark is here all the time and is interacting with
Right.
employees as well as elected officials. And so we would not necessarily see that violation. And that's why I'm saying I'm hoping that if he just mentions, gee, you need to put a mask on, you need to keep it on, whether somebody's here or not, you need to do that.
Right.
If it is met with any kind of resistance, then, you know, it's incumbent upon us as other elected officials to support this mandate. And if they refuse to do it, then they will be asked to go home. But it may come, you know, hopefully that won't happen. But if it does, it would probably come better from an elected official to an elected official as opposed to an employee to an elected official. So it's more of a process. And I am hoping and I'm expecting that will not happen. Because I mean, I know all our elected officials and our employees, and they're wonderful people. And I think if we just point it out to them, excuse me, I think they'll realize how serious this is, especially since there's a resurgence of COVID right here within Plaistow. We have to hunker down. We have to do what we need to do this. So, Julian, go ahead.
Well, I'm reading this memo, and it basically says to contact the board chair or vice chair. One thing, we don't work in this building all day. We may not be able to be contacted. So the person who's in the building, the town manager, his
Right.
hands are tied to have to go contact one of you two, which I don't believe he should have to. I
Only
think
if
we can
they
give him
refuse.
we can motion to give him that authority.
Only if they refuse. He's going to ask them to put their masks on right away.
Yeah.
If they refuse, then he contacts either me or
He may not be able
Greg.
to contact either of you.
He
Then he's
usually
tied, his hands
can.
are tied by the way this is written. I think we should motion to give him the authority ahead of time. Because the thing is, what's your answer going to be? You're going to give him the authority. I don't think you're going to say no, right?
No, I'm not going to give him the authority. If he has to call me to tell me,
Well, he can
you
tell
know,
you,
Joe
but in the
Schmo is
meantime,
not coming
if he
in.
can't call you, he can't reject the person from the building. It ties his hands.
Julian, he can always reach either me or Greg. We always respond to him immediately. That's not an issue. It's only if he runs into a problem with an elected official. And I honestly don't think that's going to happen, but in case it does, we will take that stopgap measure. So, you know, if you don't feel comfortable signing this, that's okay.
I'm just suggesting it's an unnecessary step. So,
I don't think it's going to even get to that point, to be honest with you, but I
Well,
think
hopefully
that we
not.
should be, again, in solidarity with the rest of the employees and with our town manager. Go ahead, Jay.
I'm in support of it. I don't think it's ever going to get back to the board at this point, but.
I don't either.
It just, I don't know, it just sounds different because the town manager manages the town and all of the facilities and the people in those buildings, whether they're someone coming in for a meeting, because they may not be an elected, they may be an appointed, or just someone coming in to register their car. They're in the building. So, you know, I'll support it. I think it's, I don't think it's a big deal, but he has the authority to turn people away from the building if they have to wear a mask, and they're not going to do that.
Yes, I think this is only in an instance where someone refuses to leave. I think that's what the issue was, and Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that was a scenario that we were looking at where you had asked someone to put a mask on or to leave, and they refused to do so. And in that instance, then he would need to have a little bit more support to have that happen. So.
Are other towns
He already has my
taking these types of positions? Are other towns doing this as
I
well?
don't know, Mark, I don't know if you could answer that for us?
I actually don't, try to copy what other towns are doing or aren't doing. I was looking at that there's 3 types of people in our buildings. There is the public, there is the employees, and then there are elected and appointed officials. And I looked at the jurisdiction of the groups of the 3. And I know that I can exclude somebody from the building if they're a member of the public and they're not complying with a policy of masking up and social distancing and, observing all of the protocols. And same thing with employees. But I don't have the jurisdiction or the authority on elected or appointed officials. So therefore, I have consulted with the Board of Selectmen because you are the chief elected officials for the town. I don't think this needs to get difficult. If you don't want to do it, then just, don't do it. I'm bringing an issue to you because it is an issue. There are elected and appointed officials that have resisted wearing masks in our town facilities over the last 6 months. And what that does is it creates conflict. And it also places the employees in a uncomfortable position, and it places the public coming into my office to complain because an elected official isn't wearing a mask and they're not complying with what they have to do. And there's conflict. You can think that this doesn't happen. It does happen. So
Mark,
how do you want to handle it?
Mark, to make things very clear, okay, we are in support of this. What we are basically saying is we're a little bit dumbfounded that you don't have the authority to be able to do that. That the protection of the employees in this town is your responsibility. And if somebody is a threat to them, I would expect that you would take every action to remove that threat.
Well,
I guess it's my
passive, objective
contention
threat.
that you would try to remove the threat by either asking them to put their mask on or leave. And 9 times out of 10, that would be enough. They would either put their mask on or they would leave the premises. It's only in that third instance where someone would get belligerent and said, I'm not doing that. You're not the boss of me, and I'm not doing it, and I'm not leaving it. And then that's that third layer that we would have to get involved in. And I think we've belabored this way more than we should. There is a memo out here. If you wish to sign it, please sign it. And if you don't, that's okay too. But I think this is something that we need to get out there to the boards and committees and to elected people. And I think that it will be enforced. And I really think people will, I don't think we're going to need to get to that third level where a board member needs to escort someone out. I really don't think so. But it's just a one more layer of consistency throughout all of our board. One last
I think
point,
the only
and then we're
thing
moving
the
on.
town manager was asking for, since he doesn't have the legal authority over an elected official or
Right.
whatever,
Right.
he asked us, which we
Right.
do have that authority, and I would say just give him the blanket position, because I trust our town manager.
Yep.
He doesn't
Yep.
need to call me or you or whatever. If it happens, he just needs to let us know afterwards, but he shouldn't have to wait to do that, because the sooner the person is out of here, the less chance people are getting exposed.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And
I understand he doesn't have the direct legal authority. Well, I'd say just give it to him now. We have, as a board, decided that if he asks someone to leave, they should leave.
Right.
Or comply.
Yep.
And I don't think we need to get involved. I think we've already given him permission to do it.
Yes, we
He doesn't
have.
need to call.
We have.
He should be able to, we're
This
giving
is-
him the authority by a vote. We could give him by authority by a vote, and it comes from the Board of Selectmen,
right.
and now
We've
he
already
is
done
covered.
that. We have already done
Right.
that.
But
We've
that's not
already
what this
done that.
says. It says you have to call you to get you to do it.
Only if someone refuses to leave or put a mask on.
Well, I'm saying we can give that permission without having the call.
All right, I think we've
It doesn't
beaten
make
this
any
to
sense.
death.
Okay, do we have 3 signatures at least on that?
Yes, I believe, do we have, how many signatures do we have on the thing? Do we have it in the signature folder? And Tim, did you want to make a comment
Just,
too?
yeah, just one quick comment. I mean, to me, this is a public health issue.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a mandate that you can't smoke in buildings, whether you're elected, appointed, an employee, or a visitor from
Mars.
wherever. I would think this would come in the same, you don't have a mask, you can't come in the building.
Yep,
Now,
I agree.
if you forget a mask or don't have one, there are, in the lobby, there are masks available for people to use. So you're not precluding people from coming in the building, but I think it should be, straightforward.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I've also heard people tell me directly, I don't report to you, and I quote that, and it's like, you're right, you don't, but we still have to have a mechanism to enforce what you said is a public health issue, and I agree with you on that. So we're not going to discuss this anymore. We have 4 signatures on it. I would like to ask if, when it's distributed out, Beth, do the rest of the board members and committee members and employees have the other 2 memos from Denise and Lori? Do you know, or Mark, do you know that, or?
I don't know, but I would send out all 3 so that everybody has all 3 memos.
All right, I think that would be a good idea. And like I said, I'm sure that we're not even going to get to the point where we're ever going to need to invoke that, but just in case, we have it in our back pockets. So moving right along, again, we're a little bit late here. Would you like to give us your town manager's report?
Sure. Is Greg still here?
I don't know.
Greg,
My screen's blank. Yeah, he is. Okay. Thanks for
Yeah,
staying.
Greg,
I am
do
here.
you want to jump in with 2 things, at least 2 things, if you want to talk briefly about the tax rate and also about the water budget?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
So in the folders tonight, is a revised water budget. Had worked with Keith Pratt after the last meeting, to basically add in some line items and the like that were necessary, but we kept the budget within the board voted amount of $431,300. So there was a little bit of reallocation between the water operator and the necessary purchase of water that you can see down near the bottom. And then also the addition of a line item for chemicals for treatment of the system and the like. So it is a little bit more detailed. It takes what Underwood and Keith had put together and it combines it what we had started with to put it in one document so that the board can see that specifically.
Okay. Thank you for doing that for us. It makes it a lot clearer than the last one that we looked at, and I'm glad you added some of the line items in it, like the water purchase, because that's one of the most important things we need to do is buy the water. So thank you.
Exactly. And I mean,
Yeah.
obviously with the board's approval, I will pass this along to the budget committee so that they have it as well.
All right. Would you like a formal vote on that? Or a consensus from the board to pass this on to the budget committee for their review?
Madam Chairman, I would prefer a formal vote, just so that we don't have anybody claiming that it wasn't voted on by the board. And again, it was just putting in more detail on what was needed. And this was evolving, and just to give you an idea, the original pump station that hasn't been built was originally designed and did not have a chemical feed. But as a result of the water quality, as it comes down all of the pipes and crosses through communities, they have noticed that there needs to be a treatment or a possible chemical feed to treat the water for the quality of the water by the time it reaches Plaistow. So, things like that had to be added in. And we just got the figures from Underwood on what that takes and what they're recommending for that. So that gives you an idea. This has been evolving as the project's been evolving. And one thing that Greg didn't mention, obviously, we put in for the expenses of the water, but there's also going to be a revenue. And the revenue is more than what we pay for the water. So the revenue offset is going to account for whatever we spend for expenses for the water.
So could I have a
But
motion on
we buy it at wholesale and we sell it at retail.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to reconsider the revised water department budget for $431,300.
All right, may I have a second on that?
Second.
Jay?
All right, Jay's going to second it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? All right, so the motion carries for the revised approval of the water budget, 500. Okay, so Greg, you want to talk to us about the tax rate?
Yeah, I can talk real quick. Based on the last board meeting that voted to utilize the 2019 values, Mary Beth from Corcoran and Associates was able to get the MS1 done very quickly and diligently. It went through the process through DRA. To summarize real quick, what it basically did was it took the 2019 values and added a net value, if you will, of $18.8 million to the total assessment to bring the town's total value that is taxable up to 1.2 billion, and these numbers are rough. So I worked with Jamie Dow from DRA over the weekend and then again this morning to get a tentative tax rate set this morning in the amount of $21.65 per thousand evaluation, which basically amounts to the town's rate itself. There is an overall decrease of 43 cents. The school rate went up in total 87 cents, and the county rate went down 10 cents. So the overall difference between 2019 and 2020 is a net increase of 34 cents or 1.6%. And this is not utilizing any fund balance other than what was voted at the by the voters at town meeting, which was in the neighborhood of 670,000. So, I mean, our fund balance is still a little bit light with the retention, but I don't believe there is any concern there. So, but tentatively, we're at 2165 at just a 34-cent increase.
Okay, and the majority of that increase, as you reiterated, was from the school department. The municipality was able to decrease our municipal tax rate by 43 cents. And so the taxpayers understand that that's the only portion of our tax that we can control. And I think we did a really good job in trying to mitigate that and reduce that. So thank you for all your hard work. And also I thank Mary Beth for turning this around so quickly. So I'll turn this back.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. I'll turn this back over to Mark so you can just briefly go through the rest of your town manager's report.
Yes, so I just want to recap what you just heard. All of the increase is from the school. None of the increase is from the town or the county.
Got it.
Okay, can you still hear me?
We can. We can't see you, but we can hear
Okay.
you.
Okay, well, I can either watch you or listen to you. I can't do both with the actual instrument I have, so I have to get an upgrade or something here. So the contract for Revision Energy was worked on by Dee, myself, and Attorney Kalman, and we've got it all done, and we are in contact with Revision Energy. And we believe we have a final document. We're waiting for one specification sheet to come in on one piece of hardware. And once that we get past that, we will be awarding a contract to Revision Energy consistent with the direction from the board last meeting. I already spoke to you about the landfill cap request for proposals. That is on our website and that is launched. And then we will wait for the pricing to come back. the water tank filled with water, and they have drained it back out into the reservoir. And in the course of this, they were able to fix a broken fire hydrant down at the pump house. And the brick building is under construction up at the water tank site. The DeFelice has moved to Westville Road and has made great progress. Perhaps even in Selectmen's comments, Selectman Blinn can actually tell us the status of that, since he's got a business over there, and I did not get over there today. I avoided the construction and took some different routes. So it's expected that they'll actually be over on Wentworth Ave next week. Chadwick Lane, we had a water break a couple weeks ago. We had it fixed, and we temporarily fixed the road so that we can see how much of the material below was washed out, and we may have to revisit that to fix that in the spring. The painters finished up the salt shed, and we ordered 200 tons of salt to be delivered, and I have arranged for the contractor to put the plywood up. He's simply going to construct the plywood by standing on top of the salt piles, and I notified the electrician, and he's giving me a quote for interior and exterior lights. The old salt shed, I instructed the highway supervisor to use the remaining salt, and as soon as that salt is exhausted, then we will disassemble the old salt shed. I received a mutual aid request from the town of Seabrook, and their consultant and the town manager are coming to see me this Thursday. They want to talk about a continuity of operations for themselves should they be hit with a large-scale disaster, to see if there is some kind of administrative space that we could swap with them. And I said, well, I would bring it to the Board of Selectmen when I have more information. And then obviously I would recommend that if you do go forward with a mutual aid type of agreement with Seabrook, that we also have a mutual aid with them in case we need some space, in case something happens with us. So I'll bring that back to the board when I have more information. Tonight you handled the COVID-19 memos. Busby starting construction at Park tomorrow for the swales closest to the road to Colley's Lane. And Busby's also starting the roadway construction tomorrow next to the public safety complex. And that's all I have tonight, Madam Chairman.
All right, that's plenty, that's plenty. It's getting late, and we are going to have to go into a non-public session very briefly, so I'm going to forego Selectmen's reports if you guys are okay with that, unless somebody really wants to tell me all the wonderful stuff that you guys have been doing in town. And I think this is going to be our last meeting until Thanksgiving, so before we go into our non-public, I want to wish everyone a wonderful Thanksgiving. It's going to be very different than what it was last year, but we have many things to be grateful for. So everyone take care, be safe, have a good holiday, and I am going to adjourn this meeting at 9:13 p.m.
Which category do we want?
If we could, yeah, we will not be going back into public session after our non-public meeting, so if we could go into non-public under C, reputation, and it will not take long.
All right, Madam Chair, I'll make a motion that we go into non-public under RSA 91-A:3, 2C, reputation.
All right, may I have a second?
Second.
All right, Jay seconded. May I have a roll call vote, please? Yes.
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 Yes. Just want to say happy Thanksgiving to everybody, and yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, so good night, everyone. We are now going into non-public session. Mark, if you could stay with us, I'd appreciate it. And Greg, if you wish to.